Chapter 2141. As for the inn, General Li has already ordered the soldiers of the Bing Province barracks to surround the area 1 li around the inn. All the entrances and exits have been heavily guarded to prevent the Turkic spies from coming out and causing trouble. At the Taiyuan courier station, Iron Egg cupped his hands at Mo Huai and replied, It's good to seal it off. Otherwise, these Turkic spies will stir up trouble in the city again and cause chaos in the city. Mo Chui nodded and praised. He knew that a portion of the people in Taiyuan City had been looting the official rations yesterday afternoon. He hesitated for a moment before asking, Qin Ke, how is Qin Ke now? Is there any news? No. Iron Egg shook his head and said, Yesterday afternoon, I was using binoculars to observe the inn from the south gate. Perhaps it was because it was too far away or because Qin Ke was staying in the guest room on the north side of the inn, so I didn't see her through the binoculars. Moreover, the inn is surrounded by Turkic spies. It's very difficult for General Li's men to get close. We can only act according to circumstances. Mo Chui's face became worried. Privately, Li Tai was one of the most outstanding students in Yanhuang College. As a teacher, he naturally didn't want anything to happen to him. Publicly, Li Tai was the great Tang's King Wei and one of Li Tai's most beloved princes. He naturally didn't dare to let anything happen to Li Tai. After a moment of silence, Mo Chui sighed and said, It's good that there's no news now. As long as the leader of the Turkic spies is still in the hands of the officials, Qin Ke will be safe. We can only slowly wait for an opportunity. But this way, we don't know how long Taiyuan City will have to seal the city gate. Also, we don't know if the rations in the city can last until we rescue Qin Ke. Sir, you don't have to worry about the rations. Iron Egg cupped his hands and said, According to what this student knows, the rations in the city's official storehouse are still sufficient. When the rations are running low, we can use the telegraph to ask the Flaming Yellow Chamber of Commerce to help mobilize rations from the nearby counties to reinforce the city. Iron Egg, you're right. When the time comes, we can still borrow the strength of the Yanhuang Chamber of Commerce. Hearing this, Ingchue recalled that they still had the telegraph to send news to the outside world, and they also had the huge resources of the Yanhuang Chamber of Commerce to make use of. In addition, General Li also caught 2 Turkic spies who tried to break into the prison last night. These 2 were the leaders of the Turkic spies. One was in the Guru realm, and the other was at the peak of the Qi refining stage. Now, the strength of the Turkic spies in the inn has been greatly reduced. Seeing Mo Chui heave a sigh of relief, Iron Egg told Mo Chui another piece of good news. Hearing this, Mo Chui was overjoyed. What? Last night, General Li even captured 2 leaders of the Turkic spies? Wait, are you saying that someone broke into the prison last night? After the pleasant surprise came the horror. Mo Chui did not expect that someone would attempt to break out of the prison last night. He knew that Zhao Dian was imprisoned in the state capital's prison. Just think about it, if Zhao Dian was taken away, then wouldn't Li Tai's little life be in danger? Thinking of this, a layer of cold sweat appeared on Mo Chui's back. Iron Egg smiled and said, Mr. Mo Chui, there's no need to be nervous. The other party failed to break out of the prison and even lost themselves. You'd better ask my father about the details. It's getting late, I have to go to the provincial governor's residence. Iron Egg caught a glimpse of the redness in the eastern sky. Only then did he remember that he was going to find Li Junxian. He hurriedly excused himself from Mo Chui and rushed out of the courtyard. Tong Fu Inn, heavenly guest room. Li Tai had also woken up early. Most importantly, he had gone to bed early at night, so his sleepiness had long disappeared. If this was the academy, the little fatty would definitely still be snoring away. There was no other way. The academy had the evening self-study, and the dormitory was crowded and lively. The students generally slept relatively late, and Li Tai was no exception. That fellow still hasn't returned? After getting out of bed, Li Tai subconsciously went to the outer room to search, but he didn't see Xian Yi. His heart thumped and he couldn't help but mutter, "That's right, I didn't see Xian Yi or Tianying last night. Did the two of them not return last night?" Li Tai's face was covered in pleasant surprise. His mind whirled as he muttered to himself, "For the two of them to disappear last night is definitely abnormal. They can't be up to anything good. But since the two of them still haven't returned, there's an 80% chance that they've been trapped or captured by the soldiers. In that case, aren't these Turkic spies a bunch of dragons without a leader? This king is saved." After being held hostage by the Turkic spies for several days, Li Tai had basically figured out the personnel structure here. He knew that this group of people was led by Zhao Dian, and Xian Yi and Tianying were Zhao Dian's most capable generals. Not only were the two of them powerful in martial arts, they were also above average in terms of intelligence. They were extremely difficult opponents to deal with. With the two of them around, Li Tai could only obediently be an obedient child, not daring to make any small movements. This was because he knew that his small movements wouldn't escape the eyes of Xian Yi and Tianying. However, it was very likely that the two of them would not be able to return. Didn't that mean that Li Tai's opportunity had arrived? Let's go out and see if they really didn't return last night. After thinking for a while, Li Tai looked in the direction of the door, hesitated for a moment and then walked out. "In my opinion, we should capture King Wei and negotiate with the soldiers to have them release the two leaders. Otherwise, we'll slaughter that little fatty." As Li Tai approached the door and was about to open it, he heard a rough voice coming from the hall on the first floor of the inn. Li Tai recognized this voice. It was none other than Twilight Flood Dragon, who had been guarding his door last night. Li Tai's heart tightened. It turned out that this group of Turkic spies had been having a meeting early in the morning to discuss how to deal with him, but he soon relaxed, because Twilight Flood Dragon's words just now had confirmed his conjecture. Xian Yi and Tianying really were in trouble. Chapter 2142. Smack. Are you an idiot, kid? If the officials were really so obedient, why didn't they use Wei Wang's life to threaten them to release the guard master when Xian Yi and Commander Sky Eagle were still around? Although the officials really want to save Wei Wang, they aren't so stupid as to let us go. Just as Li Tai's thoughts were racing, Cloud Scorpion's angry rebuke came from the first floor hall. Speaking of which, the characters of these two brothers were really different. One of them seemed careless and impatient, and he often threatened to kill the little fatty Li Tai, but in fact, his brain wasn't very nimble, and he could even be said to be simple-minded. The other one, on the other hand, was calmer and more clear-headed. However, this was only when compared to his brother Twilight Flood Dragon. If compared to Xian Yi and Sky Eagle, he was simply not enough. "What do you think we should do, big brother? Something must have happened since the two leaders didn't return last night. The inn is surrounded by soldiers now. We can't even send someone out to scout for information. We can't just hide in the inn and wait for death, can we?" Twilight Flood Dragon rubbed the back of his head, but he wasn't angry. However, one could tell from his voice that he was very anxious now. Something must have happened since the two leaders didn't return last night. However, they might not have been captured by the officials. If we go out rashly, we will only walk right into their trap. Cloud Scorpion was silent for a moment. Then, his eyes suddenly lit up as he spoke. "Smack. Are you an idiot, kid? If the officials were really so obedient, why didn't they use Wei Wang's life to threaten them to release the guard master when Xian Yi and Commander Sky Eagle were still around? Although the officials really want to save Wei Wang, they aren't so stupid as to let us go." Just as Li Tai's thoughts were racing, Cloud Scorpion's angry rebuke came from the first floor hall. Speaking of which, the characters of these two brothers were really different. One of them seemed careless and impatient, and he often threatened to kill the little fatty Li Tai, but in fact, his brain wasn't very nimble, and he could even be said to be simple-minded. The other one, on the other hand, was calmer and more clear-headed. However, this was only when compared to his brother Twilight Flood Dragon. If compared to Xian Yi and Sky Eagle, he was simply not enough. Big brother, what do you think we should do? Something must have happened since the two leaders hadn't returned for an entire night. Now that the inn is surrounded by soldiers, we can't even send someone out to scout for information. We can't just hide in the inn and wait for death, can we? Mu Jiao rubbed the back of his head. He did not get angry. However, from his voice, one could tell that he was very anxious. Something must have happened since the two leaders didn't return last night, but it's not necessarily because they were caught by the authorities. If we go out rashly, we'll only be walking right into their trap. Cloud Scorpion was silent for a moment, and then his eyes lit up. Smack! Brat, are you stupid? If the officials were really so obedient, why didn't they use King Wei's life to threaten the officials to release Lord Wei when Xian Yi and Sky Eagle Commander were still here? Although the authorities want to save King Wei, they are not stupid enough to let us go. Just as Li Tai's mind was racing, Cloud Scorpion's angry rebuke came from the hall on the first floor. Speaking of which, the characters of these two brothers were really different. One of them seemed careless and impatient, and he often threatened to kill the little fatty Li Tai, but in fact, his brain wasn't very nimble, and he could even be said to be simple-minded. The other one, on the other hand, was slightly calmer and more clear-headed. However, this was only when compared to his brother Twilight Flood Dragon. If compared to Xian Yi and Sky Eagle, he was simply not enough. What do you think we should do, big brother? Something must have happened since the two leaders didn't return last night. Now that the inn is surrounded by soldiers, we can't even send someone out to scout for information. We can't just hide in the inn and wait for death, can we? Chapter 2143. Shunzhan, you old bastard. You're a two-faced person, yet you dare to slander this prince. How dare you? In the corridor on the second floor of Tongfu Inn, Li Tai leaned against the railing as he cursed at Shunzhan, who was in the hall on the first floor. Shunzhan had just been ruthlessly humiliated by Li Tai yesterday afternoon, so he was already harboring a grudge. Therefore, in a moment of desperation, he had pushed the blame to Li Tai to preserve his life. Now that he had been scolded so badly by Li Tai, how could Shunzhan maintain his composure? New and old grudges surged in his heart as the old man pointed at Li Tai and said to everyone, "Leader Cloud Scorpion, did you see that? That punk was hiding in the shadows and eavesdropping on our conversation. Who knows, when I was discussing matters with the two leaders, Xian Yi and Skyhawk, this punk might have been hiding in the shadows to eavesdrop." Then, he secretly informed the authorities of the news, which resulted in Lord Xian Yi and Lord Skyhawk being ambushed by the authorities. The old man's move could be considered a quick-witted move. He wanted to use this opportunity to beat Li Tai to death. Indeed, upon hearing that, Cloud Scorpion narrowed his eyes slightly. The hot-tempered Twilight Flood Dragon stepped off the ground and flew towards where Li Tai was standing. Then, like an eagle carrying a chick, he lifted Li Tai from the corridor on the second floor to the hall on the first floor. Then, Twilight Flood Dragon glared angrily at Li Tai and said, "Speak. Did you betray Xian Yi and the leader of Sky Eagle?" Li Tai was a pampered prince to begin with. When had he ever been lifted down from the second floor like that? Fatty was immediately enraged as he pointed at Twilight Flood Dragon's nose and cursed, "Do you have any king brains? Do you have to follow whatever that guy says? Why don't you try touching this king again? At most, this king will bite his tongue and commit suicide. I'll make all of you, including your Lord Guard, accompany this king to the grave." Twilight Flood Dragon was also a person accustomed to being tyrannical. After being scolded by Li Tai while pointing at his nose, the anger in his heart could not help but surge. He went forward and pinched Li Tai's nose. "Shunzhan, you old bastard. You're a two-faced person, yet you dare to slander this prince. How dare you? In the corridor on the second floor of Tongfu Inn, Li Tai leaned against the railing and looked over, cursing at Shunzhan, who was in the hall on the first floor. And Shunzhan had just been ruthlessly humiliated by Li Tai yesterday afternoon and was already harboring a grudge in his heart. Thus, in a moment of desperation, he had pushed the blame to Li Tai in order to save his own life. Now that he had been scolded by Li Tai, how could Shunzhan maintain his face? The old man pointed at Li Tai and said to the crowd, "Don't worry. Cloud Scorpion Leader, do you see that? This brat was hiding in the dark and eavesdropping on our conversation again. Who knows, when I was discussing matters with the two leaders, Xian Yi and Skyhawk, this brat might have been hiding in the dark and eavesdropping. Then, he secretly informed the authorities of the news, which resulted in Lord Xian Yi and Lord Skyhawk being ambushed by the authorities." The old man's move could be considered a quick-witted move. He wanted to use this opportunity to beat Li Tai to death. Indeed, upon hearing this, Cloud Scorpion narrowed his eyes slightly. The hot-tempered Twilight Flood Dragon stepped off the ground and flew towards where Li Tai was standing. Then, like an eagle carrying a chick, he lifted Li Tai from the second floor's corridor to the hall on the first floor. Then, Twilight Flood Dragon glared angrily at Li Tai and said, "Speak. Did you betray Xian Yi and the leader of Sky Eagle?" Li Tai was a pampered prince to begin with. When had he ever been lifted down from the second floor like this? Fatty was immediately enraged as he pointed at Twilight Flood Dragon's nose and scolded, "Do you have any king brains? Do you have to follow whatever that guy says? Why don't you try touching this king again? At most, this king will bite off his tongue and commit suicide. I'll make all of you, including your Lord Guard, accompany this king in death." Chapter 2144. You mean that the government noticed our plan and set up an ambush in the provincial governor's residence, leading to the capture of commanders Xian Yi and Tianying? In the hall on the first floor of Tongfu Inn, Yun Xie looked at Li Tai with a gloomy gaze and asked in a deep voice. Before Li Tai could answer, Shunzhan hastily interjected, "Impossible! Impossible!" When this bribed the officers and jailers of the provincial governor's residence, this was extremely cautious, and all of the people he chose were greedy individuals. This only gave them 40% as a deposit. If they want the remaining 60%, they must help this and save the guard lord. Thus, these people can't possibly sell me out. Dusk Flood Dragon and Cloud Scorpion found Shunzhan's words reasonable and nodded. Li Tai looked at Shunzhan like he was an idiot, and then he said in a mocking tone, "Although it's not very likely that these greedy individuals would sell you out, there's no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. Do you think that your little tricks could escape the eyes of the 100 horsemen? Don't forget that besides the 80,000 soldiers of the Bing province, Taiyuan City also has the 100 horsemen under Li Junxian. The 100 horsemen are extremely skilled at investigating, and the provincial governor's residence is where Zhao Dian is imprisoned. Do you think that the 100 horsemen wouldn't have planted spies in the provincial governor's residence?" The 100 horsemen, Cloud Scorpion and Dusk Flood Dragon couldn't help but cry out in alarm. The two of them glanced at each other, and Cloud Scorpion couldn't help but say, "This means that the 100 horsemen might have noticed that Shunzhan bribed the officers and jailers. You mean that the government noticed our plan and set up an ambush in the provincial governor's residence, leading to the capture of commanders Xian Yi and Tianying?" In the hall on the first floor of Tongfu Inn, Yun Xie looked at Li Tai with a gloomy gaze and asked in a deep voice. Before Li Tai could answer, Shunzhan hastily interjected, "Impossible! Impossible! When I bribed the generals and guards of the provincial governor's manor, I was extremely cautious. Furthermore, the people I chose were all greedy people. I only gave them 40% as a deposit. If they want the remaining 60%, they have to help me save Lord Guard. Therefore, it is impossible for these people to betray me." Twilight WRM and Cloud Scorpion felt that Shunzhan's words made sense, and they couldn't help but nod inwardly. Li Tai looked at Shunzhan as if he was looking at an idiot. Then, with a slightly mocking tone, he said, "Although it is unlikely that these mercenary people will betray you, there is no such thing as an impenetrable wall in this world. Do you think that your little actions will be able to escape the eyes of Baichi? Don't forget that besides the 80,000 soldiers of the Bing province, Taiyuan City also has 100 cavalry led by Li Junxian. Baichi is most adept at investigating information, and the provincial governor's mansion is an important place where Zhao Dian is imprisoned. Do you think Baichi will not place spies in the provincial governor's mansion?" Baichi, Cloud Scorpion and Twilight Wyrm couldn't help but cry out in alarm. The two of them glanced at each other, and Cloud Scorpion couldn't help but say, "If this is the case, Baichi might have already noticed that Shunzhan bribed the generals and guards of the provincial governor's mansion." "You mean to say that the government noticed our plan and set up an ambush in the provincial governor's mansion, leading to the capture of commanders Xian Yi and Tianying?" In the first-floor hall of Tongfu Inn, Cloud Scorpion gloomily stared at Li Tai as he sternly asked. Before Li Tai could answer, Shunzhan hastily interjected, "Impossible! Impossible! When I bribed the generals and guards of the provincial governor's mansion, I was extremely cautious. Moreover, all the people I chose were greedy people. I only gave them 40% as a deposit. If they want the remaining 60%, they have to help me save Lord Guard. Thus, these people will never betray me." Chapter 2145. Ask for help from the steppe and coordinate from the inside. Before the other Turkic spies in the inn could react, Cloud Scorpion's face suddenly paled. Before Zhao Dian had been captured by the authorities, he had sent a messenger pigeon to the steppe, requesting Xieli to dispatch elite wolf cavalry to secretly infiltrate Taiyuan City and coordinate with the Turkic wolf guards inside the city to capture Taiyuan City in one fell swoop and capture Li Tai and the other Yanhuang College teachers and students back to the steppe. Even among these spies, this was a top-secret plan. Only 4 people knew about it, and Cloud Scorpion just so happened to be one of these 4. Even Twilight Flood Dragon didn't know about this plan. Of course, the reason why Zhao Dian didn't let Twilight Flood Dragon know about this top-secret plan was mainly because Twilight Flood Dragon's IQ was a little worrying. Zhao Dian was worried that Twilight Flood Dragon would accidentally tell others about the plan after knowing about it. That would spoil his plans. What Li Tai had just said was actually highly consistent with the top-secret plan that Zhao Dian had formulated long ago. This caused Cloud Scorpion to feel incomparably shocked. He couldn't help but wonder if Li Tai already knew about their top-secret plan. Don't you know something?" Cloud Scorpion stared at Li Tai's face. If the latter's expression showed the slightest hint of evasiveness, he would not hesitate to take Li Tai and engage in a life-and-death struggle with the authorities. This was because the only reason they were not willing to use Li Tai's life to threaten the authorities to release Zhao Dian, besides the fact that this method was likely to result in mutual destruction and could not be used unless absolutely necessary, was that they still had one last thing they could rely on: the reinforcement from the steppe. They needed time, needed to mediate with the authorities. Before the steppe reinforcements arrived outside the city, they needed Li Tai to ensure Zhao Dian's safety. Once the steppe reinforcements arrived, they would launch an attack inside the city and coordinate with the reinforcements outside to capture Taiyuan City. At that time, the entire city would be theirs. It would not be difficult to rescue Zhao Dian and capture the teachers and students of Yanhuang College. But the premise of all this was built on the premise that the Tang Imperial Court was not on guard against their plan. If the Tang Imperial Court had already known about their plan, they would have deployed a large number of troops at the border, especially the area near Taiyuan City. At that time, even if Xieli had sent out the elite wolf cavalry, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens for them to infiltrate outside Taiyuan City without anyone noticing. If that was the case, there would be no need for them to continue negotiating with the government. Since they couldn't escape death, they might as well drag Li Tai along with them and fight with the government. Perhaps they might be able to find a way out. Therefore, it was fine if Li Tai's words were unintentional, but if they were, then as the leader of the wolf guards in the inn, he would have to change his plan and take a risk. What do you know? What do you want this prince to know? Li Tai's eyes were clear. Facing Cloud Scorpion's aggressive gaze, his eyes did not evade at all. He said, "This plan is the only feasible plan that this prince came up with after racking his brains and putting himself in your shoes. How about it? Are you impressed by this prince's extraordinary wisdom?" With that said, Li Tai proudly raised his chin at Cloud Scorpion. He had a narcissistic look on his face, as though he did not realize the danger and even killing intent in Cloud Scorpion's words. Of course, it had to be said that Little Fatty's performance was at the level of a best actor. It was as though he really did not know of Zhao Dian's top-secret plan. Be it his expression, gaze, or words, there were no flaws. Cloud Scorpion, who wanted to find clues from Li Tai's expression, ultimately failed to see any clues. Perhaps this Little Fatty was really a blind cat that came up with this plan by chance? Cloud Scorpion could not help but mutter to himself when he saw Li Tai's clear eyes and his expression did not seem to be fake. With this in mind, the killing intent in Cloud Scorpion's heart could not help but dissipate. As long as the government did not know of their top-secret plan, there was still hope for them to escape Sourcepeak City. They did not need to engage in a life-and-death struggle with the government. When he saw Cloud Scorpion's gaze ease up, Li Tai couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief in his heart. Actually, before he spoke those words just now, he'd already expected Cloud Scorpion's next reaction, and he'd made sufficient mental preparations. That was why his performance was so flawless and flawless. Humph! What sort of good plan is this? Although he had relaxed his guard against Li Tai, Cloud Scorpion did not plan on being merciful with his words. He snorted coldly and said, "Now that Lord Guard, Xian Yi, and Skyhawk have fallen into the hands of the government, they will definitely press on and attempt to rescue you. It's too late for us to seek help from the grasslands now. It's too late to seek help now. We could have sought help 2 days ago," Cloud Scorpion silently added in his mind. At the same time, he could not help but feel immense admiration and joy for Zhao Dian's move. Based on the time, not only had the grasslands received their request for help, the wolf cavalry Xieli had dispatched had probably already infiltrated the Great Tang. As long as they could hold on for a few more days, they would definitely be able to receive reinforcements. With this thought in mind, Cloud Scorpion's gaze turned resolute. The only thing he could do now was lead the people of the inn to guard Li Tai and wait for reinforcements to arrive. Heh! What's there to not be in time for? With this king in your hands, the government won't dare to make any moves. All you need to do is guard the inn and completely pin down the government until reinforcements arrive. Li Tai chuckled as he spoke. "Big brother, what he says seems to make sense. Why don't we just do as he says?" On the side, Twilight Flood Dragon could not help but be tempted. In truth, he did not know about Zhao Dian's top-secret plan, but after hearing Li Tai's description, he also felt that this was their only feasible plan, which was why he was so tempted. Cloud Scorpion unhappily glared at this blockhead, thinking to himself, "Just whose fucking side are you on?" Cloud Scorpion then turned to Li Tai and sternly said, "Humph, you're probably looking forward to being rescued by the government, right? Why would you be so kind as to help us come up with a plan? Speak. Just what are you planning?" Twilight Flood Dragon immediately came to his senses. He glared at Li Tai with a fiendish expression and gruffly said, "Big brother is right. You're on the same side as the government, so why are you helping us come up with a plan? There must be some shameful scheme. Speak." Chapter 2146. Humph. The intelligence of you two brothers is far inferior to Xian Yi and Skyhawk. It's no wonder the two of you can't be the boss. Faced with Cloud Scorpion and Twilight Flood Dragon's questioning, Li Tai shook his head and mocked them in an eccentric manner. The duo's expression changed, and just as they were about to flare up, they heard Li Tai continue, "Who said that this king is wholeheartedly helping you? In fact, this king is also helping himself." Cloud Scorpion's gaze froze as he asked in a deep voice, "King Wei, what do you mean by that?" "What do I mean? I mean it literally." Li Tai threw up his hands and lampooned helplessly. "If this king didn't come up with a perfect plan for you, wouldn't you be grabbing this king and taking him to the authorities? If any random swords or arrows were to injure this king, who would this king seek justice from? Although this king isn't afraid of death, this king doesn't wish to die in such a cowardly manner. Therefore, to a certain extent, we are now in the same boat." "In the same boat?" Twilight Flood Dragon scratched his head in puzzlement. Although he could not find any loopholes in Li Tai's words, he had a nagging feeling that something was amiss. Li Tai was clearly a hostage they had taken, so how did he end up in the same boat as them? This turn of events was too sudden, so Twilight Flood Dragon was momentarily unable to wrap his head around it. Cloud Scorpion's eyes flashed. Li Tai's words had made him suddenly think of something. He seemed to realize something as he thought to himself, "Humph, so that's how it is. This punk is pretending to be smart to stall for time. One has to know that sending a messenger pigeon from Sourcepeak City to the grasslands to request for reinforcements would take a few days in addition to the time needed to send the message and dispatch the troop. This punk wants to use these few days to make a comeback? Humph, dream on. Little does he know that our reinforcements have already set off. They might even be approaching Sourcepeak City by now. They will arrive outside Sourcepeak City by tomorrow. I want to see how you can make a comeback in a short day." If Li Tai had fabricated some other reason, Cloud Scorpion might have continued to be wary of Li Tai because he felt that Li Tai had other motive. However, not only did Li Tai admit that he had done so partly for himself, the reason he gave was reasonable. Cloud Scorpion, who believed that he had seen through Li Tai's scheme, once again lowered his guard against Li Tai. He felt that everything was within his grasp. The reinforcements that would arrive outside Sourcepeak City in a few days were his greatest support. Speaking of which, when he learned that Xian Yi and Celestial Eagle had been captured by the government, Cloud Scorpion had been somewhat flustered. He had even almost forgotten about his greatest support, Zhao Dian's secret plan. If not for the fact that Li Tai had just reminded him of this plan, he would probably have been egged on by Twilight Flood Dragon's group to take Li Tai out and fight to the death with the soldiers. "Since Your Highness King of Wei doesn't want to die, then please cooperate with us for the next few days. Don't cause any trouble. Once the Turkic reinforcements arrive, we will take you out of Sourcepeak City and ensure your safety. Otherwise..." Cloud Scorpion faintly smiled as he warned Li Tai. "Humph, there's no need for you to teach this king how to do things." Li Tai coldly snorted, and then he arrogantly waved his sleeve and walked up the stairs with his hands behind his back. He knew that he had fooled Cloud Scorpion and Twilight Flood Dragon. There were many times when a perfect and flawless lie was more likely to arouse the wariness of others, especially at the juncture of life and death. Thus, he had intentionally given Cloud Scorpion a flaw so that he would believe that he had seen through his plan. This way, not only could his plan be carried out smoothly, he could also lower his foe's wariness of him. Ever since Li Tai had been dragged down the stairs by Twilight Flood Dragon, this confrontation had begun to brew in his mind. On the surface, it seemed like Li Tai had lost, but in reality, he had completely defeated Cloud Scorpion. The Imperial Court was now on guard, and the garrisons of the border provinces had been ordered to be on high alert. The steppe reinforcements would not arrive as quickly as Cloud Scorpion had predicted. This gap in time was the chance that Li Tai had bought for himself to be rescued. Chapter 2147. Iron Egg, You also want to participate in the plan to rescue King Wei? In the main hall of the provincial governor's residence, Li Junxian gave Wang Liaoyuan and Fang Gongting a few more instructions on stabilizing the city. Just when he was about to leave, Iron Egg suddenly arrived. Upon learning of Iron Egg's intentions, Li Junxian asked in surprise. In his plan, all the participants had to be top-class experts, because each of them would have to deal with several, even tensome Turkic spies. Without sufficient skill, let alone completing the mission, they wouldn't even be able to protect themselves. Thus, he had made an exception and allowed Wang Chungu to lead several top-class experts from the Wang clan's shadow guards into this plan. But compared to Wang Chungu, Iron Egg's martial arts were lacking. Even though Iron Egg was the disciple of Li Zishuan and had an above-average talent amongst the younger generation, he was still young. Qinke was kidnapped because of me. I must save her. Iron Egg firmly nodded. Li Junxian could naturally sense Iron Egg's resolve, but after a few moments of hesitation, he shook his head. No. My plan is too dangerous for you. Moreover, I've already gathered enough strength and am very confident that I can rescue His Highness. There's no need for you to participate. Li Junxian had refused partly because he did not want Iron Egg's participation to affect his plan, and partly because he wanted to protect Iron Egg. After all, Iron Egg was Li Zishuan's disciple. If something happened to him, Li Junxian wouldn't be able to answer to Li Zishuan. Generally, although Iron Egg, you also want to participate in the plan to rescue King Wei? In the main hall of the provincial governor's residence, Li Junxian gave Wang Liaoyuan and Fang Gongting a few more instructions on stabilizing the city. Just when he was about to leave, Iron Egg suddenly arrived. Upon learning of Iron Egg's intentions, Li Junxian asked in surprise. In his plan, all the participants had to be top-class experts, because each of them would have to deal with several, even tensome Turkic spies. Without sufficient skill, let alone completing the mission, they wouldn't even be able to protect themselves. Thus, he had made an exception and allowed Wang Chungu and several other top-class experts of the Wang clan's shadow guards to participate in his plan. But compared to Wang Chungu, Iron Egg's martial arts were somewhat lacking. Even though Iron Egg was a student of the younger generation, and Iron Egg's talent was above average among the younger generation, he was still young. Qinke was kidnapped because of me. I have to save her. Iron Egg firmly nodded. Li Junxian could naturally sense Iron Egg's resolve, but after a few moments of hesitation, he shook his head. No. My plan is too dangerous for you. Moreover, I've already gathered enough strength and am very confident that I can rescue His Highness. There's no need for you to participate. Li Junxian had refused partly because he did not want Iron Egg's participation in his plan to be affected, and partly because he wanted to protect Iron Egg. After all, Iron Egg was Li Zishuan's disciple. If something happened to him, Li Junxian wouldn't be able to answer to Li Zishuan. Generally, although Iron Egg, you also want to participate in the plan to rescue King Wei? Chapter 2148. Li Junxian agreed, and he even requested that our Wang clan send 4 peak Qi transformation experts to help him rescue His Highness. In the Wang clan residence, Wang Yu had just gotten out of bed when Wang Chungu returned from the provincial governor's residence to report to Wang Yu. When Wang Yu heard that Li Junxian had accepted the Wang clan's goodwill, he raised an eyebrow and smiled in delight. Yes, Patriarch. Wang Chungu cupped his fists and bowed. After a moment, he continued, however, generally requested that the people sent by the Wang clan must not be in cahoots with the Turk spies. Furthermore, the people sent must obey his orders unconditionally. It seems like Li Junxian is on his guard after last night's incident. Wang Yu was a shrewd and astute man, and he was able to deduce Li Junxian's intentions from Wang Chungu's words. It was clear that after what had happened last night at the provincial governor's residence, Li Junxian no longer dared to hand over such an important mission to the Bing province barracks. In comparison, the Wang clan seemed to be more trusted by Li Junxian. Wang Yu couldn't help but smile at this thought. He turned to Wang Chengwu and said, "I leave this matter to you. This old man has been away from the ancestral residence for many years, so I am not as familiar with the situation of the clan's shadow guards as you are. In a little while, you will follow Li Junxian's request and select 4 experts from the clan's shadow guards. Remember, these 4 people don't have to be the best, but they have to have a clean background. They can't be colluding with the Turks. This matter not only concerns whether we can rescue His Highness King of Wei, but also concerns the fate of the Wang clan. No mistakes can be allowed." Wang Chengwu trembled in shock and hurriedly clasped his fist. "Your subordinate understands." Wang Yu was still a little worried and said, "How about this, after you've decided on the candidates, present the name list to the old man and let him check it. If he says there's no problem, you can take those 4 people to the provincial governor's mansion to report." From the information Wang Chengwu had sent back, Wang Yu could guess that Li Junxian was about to make a major move, and this major move was probably to rescue Li Tai. In this case, the reliability of the reinforcements sent by the Wang clan was extremely important. After all, if one of the reinforcements sent by the Wang clan were colluding with a Turkic spy and switched sides at the crucial moment, they could completely ruin Li Junxian's plan. The Wang clan, which was already a sinner, could not afford to bear such a crime. Therefore, this matter was both an opportunity and a challenge for Wang Jia. If they grasped it well, the Wang clan could atone for their crimes. If they didn't grasp it well and messed it up, it would be adding to their crimes. If they didn't do it well, Li Er might directly destroy the Wang clan in a fit of anger. Just like the Chui clan back then. Li Junxian agreed, and he even proposed that our Wang clan send 4 Peak Chi transformation experts to help him rescue His Highness. In the Wang clan residence, Wang Yu had just gotten out of bed. Wang Chengwu had returned from the provincial governor's residence to report to Wang Yu. When Wang Yu heard that Li Junxian had accepted the Wang clan's goodwill, he raised an eyebrow and smiled in surprise and delight. "Yes, Patriarch." Chapter 2149. Your Majesty, an urgent report from Taiyuan. In the western courts of the Imperial Palace, Li Er had just woken up and was getting dressed under the care of Empress Zhongsun and a group of palace maids. At this moment, Zhao Song walked in and bowed. "Oh? An urgent report from Taiyuan?" Li Er trembled and immediately turned to Zhao Song, a hint of reproach in his eyes. Everyone knew that Taiyuan City was in the middle of a storm, and what he feared the most was that bad news from Taiyuan City would cause the already weak Empress Zhongsun to suffer another blow. Thus, Li Er had always ordered Zhao Song not to speak of any reports from Taiyuan City in front of Empress Zhongsun. But why was Zhao Song acting so recklessly today? As expected, Empress Zhongsun, who was in the middle of tying Li Er's belt, couldn't help but tremble. She hurriedly shoved the belt into the hands of a palace maid and walked up to Zhao Song. "An urgent report from Taiyuan. Is there news from Qingke?" Zhao Song raised his head and met Li Er's slightly reproachful gaze. For the time being, he could only pretend that he did not see it. Speaking of which, his actions today were not because he did not know the severity of the matter. The main reason was that the urgent report contained good news. "Your Majesty, this urgent report was sent from Taiyuan early this morning. At the time, Your Majesty and His Majesty were both resting, so this old servant acted on his own initiative and suppressed the telegram. Although it is not news from His Highness King Wei, it is related to His Highness. Your Majesty, please take a look." Zhao Song took a piece of paper from his sleeve and presented it to his forehead with both hands. This telegram was from last night. No, in the early hours of this morning, when Li Junxian had captured Xianyi. "Your Majesty, An urgent report from Taiyuan. In the western courts of the imperial palace, Li Er had just gotten out of bed and was getting dressed under the care of Empress Zhongsun and a group of palace maids. At this moment, Zhao Song walked in and bowed. An urgent report from Taiyuan? Li Er's body trembled. He immediately turned his head to look at Zhao Song with a hint of blame in his eyes. Everyone knew that Taiyuan city was in the midst of a storm. Furthermore, he was most afraid that bad news from Taiyuan city would cause Empress Zhongsun, who was already in poor health, to suffer another blow. Therefore, Li Er had specially instructed Zhao Song not to speak of any information regarding Taiyuan city in front of Empress Zhongsun. Sure enough, when Empress Zhongsun, who was tying Li Er's belt, heard this, her hands could not help but tremble. She hurriedly stuffed the belt in her hands into the hands of a palace maid beside her, then quickly walked in front of Zhao Song and asked anxiously, "Taiyuan emergency report, is there news about Qin Ke?" Zhao Song raised his head and met Li Er's slightly reproachful gaze. For the time being, he could only pretend that he did not see it. Speaking of which, his actions today were not because he did not know the severity of the matter. The main reason was that the urgent report contained good news. Replying to Your Highness, it was an urgent report from Taiyuan early this morning. At the time, you and His Majesty had already gone to bed, so this old servant acted on my own initiative and suppressed the telegram. Although it is not news about His Highness King Wei, it is related to His Highness. Your Majesty, Your Highness, please take a look. Zhao Song took a piece of paper from his sleeve and presented it to his forehead with both hands. This telegram was from last night, no, early this morning, when Li Junxian had captured Xianyi. Your Majesty, an urgent report from Taiyuan. The Imperial Palace, the Western Court. Li Er had just gotten out of bed and was getting dressed under the care of Empress Zhongsun and a group of palace maids. At this moment, Zhao Song walked in and bowed. An urgent report from Taiyuan? Li Er's body trembled. He immediately turned his head to look at Zhao Song with a hint of blame in his eyes. Chapter 2150. Beep beep beep. In the Black Armored Army's camp, the soldiers had already woken up and were doing morning exercises. Li Zishuan didn't do morning exercises with the soldiers of the 5th Battalion because Bao Lin came to inform him that the telegraph had rung. Thus, he quickly returned to his tent to receive the telegram. It's Little Ku. Li Zishuan originally thought that it was Iron Egg who sent the telegram, but after confirming the identity of the person on the other end, he realized that the person who sent the telegram was actually Li Ku. Li Zishuan couldn't help but feel curious. Why would Li Ku send a telegram at this time? Could it be that something happened at the bank? Beep beep beep. Forcefully suppressing his curiosity, Li Zishuan calmed himself down and focused on the code sent by Li Ku. Speaking of which, he didn't need to take notes when receiving telegrams. He completely listened with his ears and translated it in his mind. Chang and Hu merchants in Shunkai, Kong Fuliang, and others are willing to pay a huge sum of 50,000 strings of cash to purchase the rights to the Strange Taste Pavilion's products and the western regions from the Yan Huang Chamber of Commerce. Since Mr. isn't in the Chamber of Commerce, Boss Lin, Boss Chow, and Faubert don't dare to make a decision on their own. They specially sent a student to ask if Mr. would like to cooperate with these Hu merchants. After listening to the telegram, Li Zishuan couldn't help but sneer. Humph. I was planning to settle the score with you guys after the Taiyuan incident, but I didn't expect you guys to come knocking on my door so quickly. And Shunkai, does this Shunkai have anything to do with Shunzhan? In the telegram sent by Iron Egg last night, other than describing Xian Yi and Tian Ying's failure to break out of the prison, he also roughly told him about the chaos in Taiyuan City in the past few days. This included Kong Chu colluding with the Kong merchants to hoard food, inciting civil unrest, and Shunzhan colluding with the Turkic spies to wreak havoc in Taiyuan. These merchants had relied on the fact that they had been operating in the Central Plains for many years and had vast resources and influence to dare to play dirty tricks and oppose the authorities. Whether they had done it intentionally or not, they had directly or indirectly helped the Turkic spies and made it very difficult for Li Zishuan to rescue Li Tai. One could say that Li Zishuan hated these people to the bone. Li Zishuan was now in the military camp, and Li Tai hadn't been rescued yet, so he didn't have the heart to retaliate against the 9 families of Zhaowu. But he didn't expect that those people would actually deliver themselves to his door. How could he let them go? Others might be afraid of the 9 families of Zhaowu, but Li Zishuan had the backing of the Yan Huang Chamber of Commerce, Curious Pavilion Workshop, Yan Huang College, and the Yan Huang Bank. Strictly speaking, his current power and the financial resources he could mobilize were no less than the 9 families of Zhaowu. More importantly, his mind was filled with the knowledge of the 21st century. Knowledge was priceless, and with this advanced knowledge, he could casually create many products that the people of this era would scramble for. For example, the glassware and bicycles produced by the Curious Pavilion Workshop, electric lamps, toilet paper, and so on. In the future, perfume, soap, radios, and other must-make products for transmigrators would also be created by him or his students. Each of these products would bring in a massive amount of wealth. But what about those merchants of the 9 families? As the Sut region was located at the throat of the Silk Road, the 9 families of Zhaowu, the Suts, naturally became a people with a tradition of doing business. To put it bluntly, they were hereditary middlemen. They sold China's silk to the West, and the West's gems and wine to the Tang Dynasty. These people only knew how to buy and sell, and they had no skill to speak of. They would eventually be eliminated by the times. Perhaps this was why they were willing to spend so much money to buy the right to market the products of the Curious Pavilion Workshop. They could see that the products of the Curious Pavilion were irreplaceable and that there was a massive business opportunity behind them. Beep 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 beep. Tell them that it's impossible for us to work together. Not only that, from now on, the Yan Huang Bank in the Tang Dynasty will no longer provide any services to the merchants of the Kong Kingdom and the Yin Kingdom. Chapter 2151. In modern times, financial sanctions were the most severe form of economic sanctions. The United States often imposed financial sanctions on other countries, and it was very unilateralist. Ever since World War II, the US dollar successfully defeated the British pound and became the global currency overlord. In modern times, the US dollar circulating in the world was issued by the United States Congress, but Congress never had to pay it back, because it was impossible. Moreover, the world's oil settlement was unified in the US dollar, so the US dollar had the power to set the price of oil. In addition, the U.S. money bags had operated for hundreds of years around the world to establish a cash flow channel. Through the U.S. dollar, they could almost achieve remote control of the global economy. When Li Zishuan introduced Tang Yuan and established the Yan Huang Bank, his original intention was to make it convenient for the Yan Huang College's teachers and students to spend money in the college. When this currency system matured, he would promote it to the entire Lantian County, and then to the entire Tang Empire. His ultimate goal was to let Tang Yuan replace the copper coin and become the official currency of the Tang Empire. In the end, he would use the Tang Empire's prestige in the world to promote Tang Yuan to other countries and become the world's currency. In this way, the Tang Empire's financial system would affect the entire world. At the same time, some of the inflation and economic crisis in the country could be transferred to other countries. In this way, even if the other emperors after Li Er were muddle-headed and incompetent, at least with a strong financial system, they would not be as poor as the Chongzhen dynasty at the end of the Ming dynasty. Therefore, it could be said that once Li Zishuan's financial system was established, the foundation of the Central Plains dynasty would become even stronger. In layman's terms, Even if there were a few prodigal emperors in the future, the Central Plains dynasty would not be in danger of being destroyed by foreign races easily, because the family's foundation would be strong. In Li Zixuan's initial expectation, a complete and even global financial system would not be successful without the efforts of several generations, especially in ancient times when there was a lack of financial talents. Fortunately, Tang Yuan and the Yanhuang Bank received the full support of Li Zixuan and the imperial court as soon as they appeared. This starting point was much higher than what Li Zixuan had expected. In addition, with the elites of Yanhuang College, led by Li Ku, assisting Li Zixuan in establishing the Yanhuang Bank and promoting Tang Yuan, the progress of establishing the Tang Yuan currency system was much faster than Li Zixuan's initial expectations. Today, almost all of the Tang dynasty's 360 states were covered by the Yanhuang Bank, and the Tang Yuan, a new currency, was being accepted by more and more people. Not only that, last year, with Li Zixuan's efforts, Li Zixuan decided to establish a Department of Commerce to develop sea trade and started frequent sea trade with the various countries in Nanyang. In the process of trade, the lack of a unified currency brought about a lot of trouble for the merchants of various countries. The merchants of various countries either exchanged gold, silver, and jewelry for goods or bartered directly. However, these two methods of settlement were not accurate and were even more inconvenient, resulting in some disputes and friction. The appearance of the Tang Yuan completely solved this problem for the merchants of various countries. This was because this currency was not only convenient to carry around, but it was also endorsed by the Tang dynasty's imperial court. The Tang dynasty was vast and rich in resources. With the Tang Yuan, they could purchase all kinds of goods in the various states, counties, and cities of the Tang Yuan. Moreover, all the goods were clearly priced and settled with the Tang Yuan. Both parties would not be at a disadvantage, unlike in the past where they directly gave each other gold beans, gold leaves, and the like. That way of settlement was not accurate at all. Chapter 2152. Bosson, do you think the Marquis of Yong will agree to our request? Sell us the rights to market the Curious Pavilion's products in the West? In the new workshop of the Curious Pavilion, in the reception room of the Yanhuang Chamber of Commerce's headquarters, 9 uninvited guests had arrived early in the morning. These people were of different shapes and ages, but the only thing they had in common was that they were dressed in luxurious clothing. Their faces were rough, and their facial features did not resemble those of the Central Plains. However, the clothes they wore were of the Central Plains, and they were all made of high-quality silk. At this moment, a middle-aged man sitting on the left asked the white-robed elder sitting at the head of the table. The white-robed elder was called Enshunkai. His name only differed by one word from Enshuanshan's. In truth, the two were related by blood. Enshunkai and Enshunzhan belonged to the same family, and Enshunkai was Enshuanshan's cousin. However, in terms of business ability, Enshunkai was far from Enshuanshan's. Hence, the family's businesses in the Central Plains were mainly managed by Enshunzhan, while Enshunkai only helped Enshunzhan manage the businesses in the Chang'an region. The Marquis of Yong'an is a smart man. He knows how to weigh the pros and cons. The rights to market the western regions are of little value to him. If he sells it to us, not only will he get 50,000 strings of cash, we will also help the Curious Pavilion's products expand the market. I believe that the Marquis of Yong'an will make the right choice. Hearing Kong Fuliang's question and seeing the gazes of the other people in the room on him, Anshun stroked the small beard on his chin and analyzed for everyone with a face full of confidence. Furthermore, before this, I have already sent people to investigate. In this year, the Marquis of Yong'an has established the academy, repaired the roads, expanded the city, and built some sort of power station. Each of these projects cost a huge sum of money. Even if the Curious Pavilion under him earns a lot of money every day, it will definitely not be able to withstand his expenditure. Hence, I speculate that the Marquis of Yong and should be very short on money. Otherwise, the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce would not have held a donation gathering in Lantian County to raise military funds for the imperial court. Now we are willing to offer 50,000 strings of cash for the rights to market the western regions. The Marquis of Yong and will not reject such a good deal. Bosson, do you think the Marquis of Yong and will agree to our request? Are you going to sell us the rights to sell your products in the West? In the new workshop of the Strange Interest Pavilion, in the reception room of the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce's headquarters building, 9 uninvited guests had arrived early in the morning. These people were of different shapes and ages, but the only thing they had in common was that they were all dressed very luxuriously. Their faces were rough, and their facial features did not resemble those of the Central Plains. However, the clothes they wore were of the Central Plains, and they were all made of high-quality silk. At this moment, a middle-aged man sitting on the left cupped his hands and asked the white-robed elder sitting at the head of the table. The white-robed elder's name was Enshunkai, and his name only differed by one word from Enshuanshan's. In reality, the two of them were related by blood. Enshunkai and Enshunshan belonged to the same family, and Enshunkai was Enshuanshan's cousin. However, in terms of business talent, Enshunkai was far from Enshuanshan's. Hence, the family's businesses in the Central Plains were mainly managed by Enshunshan, while Enshunkai only helped Enshunshan manage the businesses in the Chang'an region. The Marquis of Yong'an is a smart man. He knows how to weigh the pros and cons. The rights to market the western regions are of little value to the Marquis of Yong'an. If he sells it to us, not only will he get 50,000 strings of cash in one go, we will also help the Strange Interest Pavilion's products expand the market. This old man believes that the Marquis of Yong'an will make the right choice. Hearing Kong Fuliang's question, and seeing the gazes of the other people in the room on him, Enshunkai stroked the mustache on his chin and confidently analyzed the situation for everyone. Chapter 2153. What? In the reception room of the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce headquarters, everyone's expressions changed after hearing Li Ku's words. Before Li Ku had arrived, they had all thought that this cooperation was in the bag. Who would have thought that they would receive such an answer? Li Zishuan had actually rejected them. Your Highness, you're saying that the Duke of Yong and does not agree to sell the rights to the Curious Pavilion's products to us in the West? And Shunkai hesitated for a moment before standing up and asking Li Ku. He suspected that he had heard wrongly. That's right. Li Ku nodded, his words as precious as gold. Ever since he had heard from Li Zishuan that there were merchants from the En and Kong kingdoms in Taiyuan City who wanted to harm Li Tai, Li Ku had begun to dislike these 9 surnamed Hu merchants. Although they could bring substantial benefits to the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce, under these circumstances, he still had to make do with money. May I ask your Highness, why did Marquis not agree? Is it because the price is too low, or does he have other concerns? We have come with sincerity. If Marquis is dissatisfied with anything, we can discuss it further. Hearing Li Ku's confirmation again, and Shunkai and the rest could not help but look at each other, their hearts chilled. After taking a deep breath, as the representative of the 9 surnamed Hu merchants, and Shunkai cupped his hands and asked again. He had to understand the reason Li Zishuan had rejected them, and whether there was any room for negotiation. He was not afraid that Li Zishuan had rejected them because the price was too low. If that was the case, they could have increased the price even more. And Shunkai felt that it was worth it even if they doubled the price. This was because the Curious Pavilion's products were all extremely profitable. After they obtained the rights, they could earn back their capital within a year. What Shunkai was truly afraid of was that there was no room for negotiation. Kong Fuliang and the others clearly understood this. At this moment, their eyes were all fixed on Li Ku. Li Ku's next words would determine whether their future business would be smooth sailing. As for Chao Wendong, Lin Wenyuan, and the other members of the Yan Huang Chamber of Commerce, they were all extremely happy. This was because if Li Zishuan did not work with these Hu merchants, then the Yan Huang Chamber of Commerce members would not be able to reduce their share of the goods from the Curious Pavilion. Moreover, when their power grew, they could sell the goods from the Curious Pavilion to the various countries in the Western region, who said that they could not expand their business to other countries. At that time, they might even be able to completely annex and replace the 9 surnamed Hu merchants. They were the 9 families of Zhao Wu, famous for their business. It was said that some of the Hu merchants had businesses in more than a dozen countries, and their wealth was enormous. When they thought that they would have a chance to surpass and replace these Hu merchants, Chao Wendong, Lin Wenyuan, and the others were all excited. They were secretly glad that they had followed the right boss. Sir, the matter of cooperation is absolutely impossible. Not only that, from today onwards, the Yan Huang Bank within the Great Tang's borders will no longer provide any services to the merchants of the Kong and An kingdoms, including lending, storing, and exchanging Tang dollars. This will continue until the king of the Kong and An kingdoms give the Great Tang a satisfactory explanation. Li Ke's eyes were like lightning as he stared straight at An Shunkai. The majesty of a king was unknowingly revealed as he spoke in a low voice. Chapter 2154. Boss Lin, please wait. Li Ke stormed off. Chao Wendong, Feng Zhihua, Lin Wenyuan, and the other members of the Flaming Yellow Chamber of Commerce followed closely behind. Lin Wenyuan was the last to leave. At this time, An Shunkai, who had recovered from his shock, hurriedly chased after Lin Wenyuan and shouted at him. Lin Wenyuan paused and frowned. Without turning his head, he said, I do not know the reason for His Highness' anger. It is useless for you to ask this old man. The matters of the Chamber of Commerce and the bank are all decided by Marquis. Since you have offended Marquis and His Highness, no one can save you. After saying this, Lin Wenyuan did not linger and hurriedly left. He did not want to have anything to do with these sinners, not to mention that there was a competitive relationship between them. He had already done his best to say this. Besides, even if he wanted to help in this matter, he could not. This was because Li Zishuan had decided on this matter. What ability did he have to change Li Zishuan's mind? Therefore, it was more important to cut ties with An Shunkai and the others as soon as possible. Hey! Boss Lin! An Shunkai panicked and wanted to chase after him. However, before he finished speaking, Lin Wenyuan had already left the room. Clearly, he could not wait to avoid him. Sigh. Why is it like this? Why is it like this? And Shunkai looked at Lin Wenyuan's departing figure, and could not help but let out a long sigh. He stood where he was and beat his chest. He had come here excitedly today because he thought that he would receive good news. However, he didn't expect that instead of good news, he would receive 2 pieces of bad news. He could still accept the first piece of bad news, but the second piece of bad news was fatal to him. It was no different from a devastating blow. From what the King of Shu said, our cooperation with the Flaming Yellow Chamber of Commerce is completely lost. The reason for this matter is because of the merchants from the Kong and An kingdom who wanted to murder the King of Wei in Taiyuan City. Bossin, do you know any merchants from the An kingdom who happen to be in Taiyuan? At this moment, a middle-aged man in a light blue robe asked. This person was not from the Kong kingdom or the An kingdom, but from the Stone Kingdom of the 9 families of Zhao Wu. His name was Shi Nanshu. Boss Lin, please wait. Li Ke flicked his sleeves and left. Chao Wendong, Feng Zhihua, Lin Wenyuan, and the other members of the Flaming Yellow Chamber of Commerce also followed closely behind. Lin Wenyuan was the last to leave. At this time, An Shun, who had recovered from his shock, hurriedly chased after Lin Wenyuan and shouted at him. Lin Wenyuan's footsteps paused. He furrowed his brows and said without turning his head, I don't know the reason for His Highness' anger. It's useless for you to ask me. The matters of the Chamber of Commerce and the bank are all decided by Marquis. Since you have offended Marquis and His Highness, no one can save you. After saying this, Lin Wenyuan did not linger and hurriedly left. He did not want to have anything to do with these sinners, not to mention that there was a competitive relationship between them. He had already done his best to say this. Besides, even if he wanted to help in this matter, he could not, because this was Li Zixuan's decision. How could he, Lin Wenyuan, have the ability to change Li Zixuan's mind? Therefore, it was more important to cut ties with Enshun and the others as soon as possible. Hey, Boss Lin, Boss Lin. Chapter 2155. Bossin, you said that you wanted to mediate, but the Marquis of Yong and has already ordered that the Yen Huang Bank will no longer provide services to merchants from our two countries. How can we mediate this? Not long after Li Ku left, and Shunkai and the rest also left the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce. Strictly speaking, they were chased out. After Faubert learned of Li Zixuan's instructions, he had already listed in Shunkai and the rest as unwelcome in the Strange Taste Pavilion. And Shunkai and the rest did not chat for long in the guest room before they were escorted out of the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce by someone sent by Faubert. On the carriage back to Chang'an, Kong Fuyang asked worriedly. On the sanctions list of the Yen Huang Bank, there were only merchants from the Kong country and the In country. Therefore, Kong Fuyang and Enshun had become fellow sufferers. When they returned, they rode in the same carriage. As for the other 7 people, they rode in their own carriages. Humph. Brother Kong, although the Marquis of Yong unfounded the Yen Huang Bank, from what this old man knows, the Yen Huang Bank does not belong to the Marquis alone. Since this path does not work, let's find another one. And Shunkai had already regained his composure and wisdom. His gaze was deep as he spoke. Kong Fuyang's eyes lit up and he hurriedly asked, "Oh, brother, do you have other connections in Chang'an?" And Shunkai stroked his beard and said in a low voice, "Not really, but this old man still knows some people in Chang'an City. But this matter has already involved King Wei. If we want to mediate, we will have to pay a hefty price. It is not something that the two of us can solve. How about this, when we return to Chang'an City, we will gather all the reputable merchants from the Kong and In kingdoms in Chang'an City to discuss this matter together. How about that?" When Kong Fuyang heard this, he immediately understood. Indeed, this matter involved the princes of the Tang Empire. If they wanted to get through the various joints, they would probably need to spend a lot of money. It was true that he and Enshun were rich, but their money did not come from nowhere. The sanctions of the Yen Huang Bank affected all the merchants from the Kong Kingdom and the In Kingdom who did business in the Tang Empire. The two of them did not need to be the big shots and spend money to resolve this matter alone. Bossin, you just said that you wanted to find a way to mediate, but the Marquis of Yong and has already given the order for Yen Huang Bank to no longer provide services to the merchants of our two countries. How can this matter be mediated? Not long after Li Ku left, and Shunkai and the rest also left the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce headquarters. Strictly speaking, they had been chased out. After receiving Li Zixuan's instructions, Faubert had already listed in Shunkai and the rest as unwelcome in the Strange Taste Pavilion. And Shunkai and the rest had not chatted in the guest room for long before they were escorted out of the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce headquarters by someone sent by Faubert. On the carriage back to Chang'an, Kong Fuyang asked worriedly. On the sanctions list of the Yen Huang Bank, there were only merchants from the Kong country and the In country. Therefore, Kong Fuyang and Enshun had become fellow sufferers. When they returned, they rode in the same carriage. As for the other 7 people, they rode in their own carriages. Humph. Old brother Kong, although the Marquis of Yong unfounded the Yen Huang Bank, from what this old man knows, the Yen Huang Bank does not belong to the Marquis of Yong alone. Since this path does not work, we will find another one. Chapter 2156. Master, what should we do now? Where are we going to gather so much cash in a day? Furthermore, I heard that not only will the Yanhuang Bank not lend us any more money, we can't even exchange for Tang Yuan or deposit money in the future. If that's the case, I'm afraid that our business will be greatly affected. In the inn residence, the old housekeeper bowed and asked in Shunkai worriedly. The inn family had dozens of shops in Chang and City, which involved various industries such as cloth, jade, pawn, and so on. For consumer shops such as ready-made clothes shops and jade shops, the ban of Yanhuang Bank would not have an obvious impact on them because they usually collected money from consumers. Even if they sometimes needed to give change, they could use the money from consumers to maintain the balance. However, shops like the pawn shop that gave out money had to give out large amounts of Tang Yuan every day. Now that Tang Yuan was widely popular and accepted by the majority of people, after getting used to the convenience of Tang Yuan, would those who came to the pawn shop to pawn their belongings be willing to accept a basket of copper coins or a stack of Tang Yuan? Therefore, without the support of the Yanhuang Bank, shops like the family pawn shop would soon be in dire straits. Humph. Bring some people to check how much cash is in the accounts of each shop. If it's not enough, I'll think of other ways. And Shunkai frowned and pondered for a moment before speaking to the old housekeeper. He knew in his heart that this was just a temporary measure. Master, what should we do now? Where are we going to gather so much cash in a day? Furthermore, I heard that the Yanhuang Bank will not lend us any more money. In the future, we can't even exchange for Tang Yuan or deposit money in the Yanhuang Bank. If that's the case, I'm afraid that our business will be greatly affected. In the inn residence, the old housekeeper bowed and asked in Shunkai worriedly. The inn family had dozens of shops in Chang and City, which involved various industries such as cloth, jade, pawn, and so on. For consumer shops such as ready-made clothes shops and jade shops, the ban of Yanhuang Bank would not have an obvious impact on them because they usually collected money from consumers. Even if they sometimes needed to give change, they could use the money from consumers to maintain the balance. However, shops like pawn shops that gave out money had to give out large amounts of Tang Yuan every day. Tang Yuan was now widely popular and was accepted by the majority of people. After getting used to the convenience of Tang Yuan, would people who came to pawn their belongings be willing to accept a basket of copper coins or a stack of Tang Yuan? Therefore, without the support of Yanhuang Bank, shops like the family pawn shop would soon be in dire straits. Take some men with you and check how much cash is in each shop's account. If it's not enough, this old man will think of another way. And Shunkai frowned and muttered to himself for a moment before he spoke to the old butler. He knew in his heart that this was only a temporary measure. Master, what should we do now? Where are we going to get so much cash in one day? Furthermore, this old servant has also heard that not only will Yanhuang Bank not lend us any more money, we won't even be able to go to Yanhuang Bank to exchange for Tang Yuan or deposit money. If that's the case, I'm afraid our business will be greatly affected. Inside the inn manor, the old steward bowed and asked in Shunkai worriedly. Chapter 2157. Your subjects congratulate your majesty. Seeing Qin Xiong take the lead, the officials did not want to dampen Li Er's spirit. They all stopped their private discussions and cupped their hands to Li Er. Among them, Cheng Yaojin was the one who shouted the loudest. Li Zixuan was the junior he valued the most. Now that the Turks were experiencing frost in midsummer, Li Zixuan's wondrous plan was more than half successful. This was a crucial factor that could decide the outcome of the war between the two countries. In this way, Li Zixuan could be said to have performed another meritorious service for the great Tang. As a senior, he naturally shared in the glory. This old fellow's voice had always been loud, and now that he could raise his voice, it caused the entire Taiji palace to hum. The generals standing beside him almost suffered internal injuries from old Cheng's voice. However, there was no lack of old foxes in the imperial court, such as Zhang Sun Wuji and Fang Xianling. Although they did not know of the plan that Li Zixuan had proposed to divide the Turks, they could tell that Li Er's words seemed to be concealing something and had not told the entire truth. This was because this method of using worldly phenomena to spread rumors and bewitch the hearts of the people required the right time and place. Yesterday, frost had descended on the steppe, and Li Er had only just sent someone to inform Tang Jian to use rumors to incite the tribes of the steppe. It was probably already too late. They believed that as an emperor who had been born on horseback, Li Er would not make such a low-level mistake. But since Li Er was so certain that the Turks would fall into internal strife, this meant that Li Er definitely had some tricks up his sleeve that they did not know of. Mao Gong. Li Er nodded at this moment, looked at one of the generals, and said in a deep voice, "This old subject is here." A slightly plump, middle-aged general walked out and cupped his hands to Li Er. "Your subjects congratulate your majesty." Seeing Qin Qiong take the lead, the officials did not want to dampen Li Er's spirits. They all stopped their private discussions and cupped their hands to congratulate Li Er. Li Zixuan was the junior he valued the most, and now that the Turkic Khaganate was in the middle of summer, Li Zixuan's wondrous plan had mostly succeeded. This was a crucial factor that could decide the outcome of the war between the two countries. In this way, Li Zixuan could be said to have performed another service for the great Tang, and as his senior, he naturally shared in the glory. This old fellow's voice had always been loud, and now that he could raise his voice, it caused the entire Taiji palace to hum. The generals standing beside him almost suffered internal injuries from old Cheng's voice. But there was no lack of old foxes in the imperial court, such as Zhang Sun Wuji and Fang Xianling. Although they did not know of the plan that Li Zixuan had proposed to divide the Turks, they could tell that Li Er was concealing something and had not told the entire truth. This was because this method of using worldly phenomena to spread rumors and bewitch the hearts of the people required the right time and geographical location. Yesterday, the plains had fallen in the middle of summer, and Li Er had only just sent someone to inform Tang Jian to use rumors to incite the tribes of the plains. It was probably already too late. They believed that as an emperor who had been born on horseback, Li Er would not make such a low-level mistake. But since Li Er was so certain that the Turks would fall into internal strife, it meant that Li Er definitely had some tricks up his sleeve that they did not know of. Mao Gong. Li Er nodded at this time, looked at one of the generals, and said in a deep voice, "This old subject is here." A plump middle-aged general walked out and cupped his hands to Li Er. Chapter 2158. Being a nameless hero, Li Zixuan did not suffer a loss. This was something that only he knew in his heart. Although Qing Yaojin was unwilling, he could only be anxious. This was because he was also very clear that if this matter was made public, many halos would be added to Li Zixuan's body. Li Zixuan's edge was too bright, and it was bound to attract a lot of unnecessary trouble. The tallest tree in the forest would be the first to be destroyed by the wind. This saying was not without reason. There are 3 open sentries at the northwest corner of the inn, and 1 hidden sentries at the 3rd and 5th trees to the west. There are 6 open sentries at the back gate of the inn, 2 hidden sentries at the tea house across the street, and 1 hidden sentries at the first tree to the east and west of the tea house. There are 4 open sentries at the northeast corner of the inn, 1 hidden sentries at the firewood pile to the west of Fenghe Street, and 1 hidden sentries at the butcher shop to the east. There are 4 open sentries at the east side of the inn, and 1 hidden sentries at the 1st, 3rd, and 5th trees to the north. On a roof 1 li away from Tongfu Inn in Taiyuan City, Iron Egg was using his binoculars to carefully scan the surroundings of Tongfu Inn for any suspicious characters. Whenever he saw someone with a sword or saber standing in one place for a long period of time, He would put down his binoculars and record that person's position on a map. Of course, this map of Tongfu Inn's surroundings had also been drawn by Iron Egg, and it was so detailed that it even detailed every blade of grass and tree. It was far more detailed than the maps of the government. Iron Egg also did not stay in one place. Whenever he could not find any useful information at one location, he would switch locations. This was truly a case of changing locations with every shot. This was primarily because there were no particularly tall buildings around Tongfu Inn. Even if Iron Egg stood on the roof of someone else's house, there would still be many blind spots. Ever since he had received the order from Li Junxian in the early morning, Iron Egg had already switched 7 or 8 observation points. His movements were very careful, and no matter where he observed, he would always be 1 li away from Tongfu Inn. This way, he could ensure that he would not be exposed. We have to change locations again. Iron Egg carefully searched the field of vision with the binoculars. After finding nothing, the Iron Egg put away the binoculars and planned to go to the next observation point. He first looked around, and when he found that there was no one around, he lightly jumped down from the roof, and then walked south along the street as if nothing had happened. The mission Li Junxian had given him was to spend the morning cleaning up Tongfu Inn. As a nameless hero, Li Zishuan was the only one who knew whether he had suffered a loss or not. Although Qing Yaojin was unwilling to accept this, he could only be anxious. He knew very well that if this matter were to be made public, Li Zishuan would be given a lot of glory. Li Zishuan would be too outstanding and would inevitably attract a lot of unnecessary trouble. The tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. This saying was not without reason. There are 3 open sentries at the northwest corner of the inn, and 1 hidden sentries at the 3rd and 5th trees to the west. There are 6 open sentries at the back gate of the inn, 2 hidden sentries at the tea house across the street, and 1 hidden sentries at the first tree to the east and west of the tea house. Chapter 2159. What? You want to investigate the area around the inn? When Li Junxian heard that Iron Egg wanted to personally investigate the area around the inn, he couldn't help but be alarmed. Without much hesitation, he hastily refused. No. This is too dangerous. His Highness is still in their hands, so even though the soldiers have surrounded the area around Tongfu Inn, they have not dared to do anything excessive. They fear that the Turkic spies in the inn will act out of desperation. If you go alone and they discover you, they will first capture you, and second, they might try to harm His Highness. This is too risky. I don't agree. Just as Li Junxian had said, although the provincial army had surrounded the area 1 li around Tongfu Inn to prevent the Turkic spies from going out and causing trouble, they only dared to surround the inn and not attack. This was because if they did anything excessive, the Turkic spies in the inn might try to harm Li Tai. In this chaotic battle, Li Junxian was not completely confident that he could safely rescue Li Tai, and there would be many variables in the rescue operation. Thus, the government and the Turkic spies were still maintaining a relatively restrained attitude. If the Turkic spies discovered that someone was investigating the area around the inn, not only would that person be in trouble, the Turkic spies might even try to harm Li Tai. Iron Egg solemnly clasped his fist to Li Junxian and said, "General Li, although I don't know the exact details of your plan, I can guess that the positions of the Turkic spies outside the inn are critical to the success of your plan. If I had missed even one, it might have affected our final rescue plan. Thus, I must personally make a trip to the inn." "What? You want to investigate the area around the inn?" When Li Junxian heard that Iron Egg wanted to personally inspect the area around the inn, he couldn't help but be alarmed. Without much hesitation, he hastily refused. No. This is too dangerous. At present, His Highness was still in their hands. Therefore, although the officers and soldiers had surrounded the Tongfu Inn, they did not dare to do anything excessive. They were afraid that the Turkic spy in the inn would act out of desperation. If they find out that you're going alone, they'll capture you. Secondly, they might harm His Highness. This is too risky. I don't agree. Just as Li Junxian had said, although the provincial army had surrounded a li around Tongfu Inn to prevent Turkic spies from going out and causing trouble, they only dared to encircle but not attack. This was because if they did anything too extreme, the Turkic spies in the inn might attack Li Tai. Li Junxian did not have absolute confidence in his ability to safely rescue Li Tai, and there would be many variables in the rescue operation. Thus, the local authorities and the Turkic spies were still restraining themselves. If the Turkic spies discovered that someone was inspecting the area around the inn, not only would that person be in trouble, the Turkic spies might also take extreme action against Li Tai. Iron Egg solemnly clasped his fist to Li Junxian and said, "General Li, although I don't know the exact details of your plan, I can guess that the positions of the Turkic spies outside the inn are critical to the success of your plan. If I had missed even one, it might have affected our final rescue plan. Thus, I must personally make a trip to the inn." Chapter 2160. Sirs, please do me a favor and let me go in to beg for something to eat? In front of the Tongfu Inn, the little beggar stumbled to the front of the guard at the entrance, bowed and begged. In addition to being a place to stay, the inn was also a place to eat. Beggars entering the inn to beg for food was a normal thing in the past, but now? Is this little beggar crazy? He dares to run to the Tongfu Inn now? I heard that something happened at the Tongfu Inn 2 days ago. A group of unknown ruthless people occupied the inn. Not only did they drive out the innkeeper and staff of the inn, but they also drove out the guests who stayed inside. I heard that many people died in the process. Yesterday, the soldiers surrounded the entire residential area. I think it's because of this matter. This little beggar is going to the inn to beg for food now. I'm afraid he's going to suffer. A few people who liked to watch the fun couldn't help but whisper after seeing the little beggar's action. Is the stinky beggar blind? Now the inn is not open to the public. Beggar, go elsewhere. The guard at the entrance of the inn glared and lifted his foot to kick the little beggar's chest. Bang! The little beggar clutched his chest as he was sent flying. After landing, he spat out a mouthful of blood with a wah sound. Get out of here! The person who kicked the little beggar fiercely glared at him. He looked as if he would take the little beggar's life if he didn't know how to appreciate kindness. Sirs, spare me. I'll leave now. The little beggar wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and fled in a hurry. Sirs, please do me a favor and let me go in to beg for something to eat? In front of the Tongfu Inn, the little beggar stumbled to the front of the guard at the entrance, bowed and begged. In addition to being a place to stay, the inn was also a place to eat. Beggars entering the inn to beg for food was a normal thing in the past, but now? Is this little beggar crazy? Now you still dare to run to Tongfu Inn? I heard that something happened at Tongfu Inn 2 days ago. A group of ruthless people of unknown origin took over the inn. Not only did they chase out the innkeeper and staff of the inn, but they also chased out the guests. I heard that many people died in the process. Yesterday, the soldiers surrounded the entire residential area. I think it's because of this matter. This little beggar is now going to the inn to beg for food. I'm afraid he's going to suffer. A few commoners who loved to watch the commotion couldn't help but whisper to each other after seeing the little beggar's actions. Is this beggar blind? Right now, the inn is not open to the public. If you want to beg for food, go elsewhere. The guard at the entrance of the inn widened his eyes and lifted his leg to kick the little beggar's chest. Bang! The little beggar clutched his chest as he was sent flying. After landing, he spat out a mouthful of blood with a wah sound. Get lost! The person who kicked out glared fiercely at the little beggar, looking as if he would take his life if the little beggar didn't know what was good for him. Spare me, sir. I'll leave right now. The little beggar wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and fled in a hurry. Sirs, please do me a favor and let me go in to beg for something to eat? In front of the Tong Fu Inn, the little beggar stumbled to the front of the guard at the entrance, bowed and begged. In addition to being a place to stay, the inn was also a place to eat. Beggars entering the inn to beg for food was a normal thing in the past, but now? Is this little beggar crazy? Now he dares to run to Tong Fu Inn? Chapter 2161. Old Master, Ma Zhanshe requests to see you. Chang and City, Chongren Lane, Zhangsun Wuji's residence. Zhangsun Wuji, who had just returned home from the morning court assembly, was welcomed by an old servant. Ma Cheng? Why is he here instead of assisting the crown prince in the East Palace? Zhangsun Wuji got down from the horse carriage and frowned when he heard the words. He was old and his body wasn't as healthy as Qing Yaojin and Qin Qiong. Thus, he couldn't ride a bicycle to the morning court assembly every day. However, he actually liked the novelty of riding a bicycle. It was convenient, fast, and he could go whenever he wanted. However, his body condition didn't allow it. Thus, after experiencing the initial novelty, Zhangsun Wuji returned to riding a carriage to the morning court assembly. Ma Cheng was the newly appointed Crown Prince Zhanshe. The previous Crown Prince Zhanshe was Li Zixuan. However, with Li Zixuan's continuous promotion over the past year, the small Crown Prince Zhanshe became a marquis and was conferred as the provincial governor of a state. With such a status, it was obviously inappropriate for him to be the Crown Prince Zhanshe. Furthermore, Li Zixuan didn't have the time to go to the East Palace to carry out Crown Prince Zhanshe's duties. Thus, about a month ago, under Zhangsun Wuji's recommendation, the newcomer Ma Cheng was appointed as the Crown Prince Zhanshe. Ma Cheng was originally a scholar under Zhangsun Wuji. He came from a poor family. Fortunately, Zhangsun Wuji recognized him and recruited him. Thus, he was able to establish himself in Chang'an City, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Ma Cheng's literary talent was outstanding and he was knowledgeable. Most importantly, he was loyal to Zhangsun Wuji. Thus, Zhangsun Wuji recommended him as the Crown Prince Zhanshe to accompany Li Chengqian in his studies. As the imperial uncle of the current dynasty, Zhangsun Wuji wanted Li Chengqian to become the true heir apparent and the future emperor of Great Tang more than anyone else. Even though Li Tai was also the biological son of Empress Zhangsun, since ancient times, it had always been the elders and not the young. Zhangsun Wuji didn't want to break this rule set by his ancestors. Because once he took the lead to break the rule, there would be countless people following behind him who wanted to break the rule. Master, Ma Zhanshe requests an audience. Chang'an City, Chongren Lane, Zhangsun Wuji's residence. Zhangsun Wuji, who had just returned home from the morning court, had not even entered the house when an old servant came up to him and bowed. Ma Cheng? What is he doing here, instead of helping the crown prince in the Eastern Palace? Zhangsun Wuji said with a frown as he got off the carriage. He was old, and his body wasn't as healthy as Qing Yaojin and Qin Qiong. Thus, he couldn't ride a bicycle to the morning court every day. However, he actually quite liked the novelty of riding a bicycle. It was convenient, fast, and he could go whenever he wanted. However, his body didn't allow it. Thus, after experiencing the novelty at the beginning, Zhangsun Wuji returned to riding a carriage to the morning court. Speaking of Ma Cheng, he was the newly appointed Crown Prince Zhanshe. The previous Crown Prince Zhanshe was Li Zixuan. However, with Li Zixuan's continuous promotion over the past year, the small Crown Prince Zhanshe had become a marquis of the current dynasty and was even conferred as the provincial governor of a province. With such a status, it was obviously inappropriate for him to be the Crown Prince Zhanshe. Furthermore, Li Zixuan indeed didn't have the time to go to the Eastern Palace to carry out Crown Prince Zhanshe's duties. Thus, about a month ago, under Zhang Sun Wuji's recommendation, the newcomer Ma Qing took up the position of Crown Prince Zhanshe. Chapter 2162. Why would Li Ku suddenly go against the merchants from the Kong Kingdom and the Yin Kingdom for no reason? In the side hall, Zhang Sun Wuji put down the teacup in his hand, looked at Ma Qing, and asked in confusion. I don't know about this. However, the Yen Huang Bank had specifically targeted the merchants from the Kong Nation and the Yin Nation. They were probably only after profits. Elders should know that the 9 families of Zhao Wu have been doing business in the Central Plains for many years. They are strong and have many shops. Perhaps the king of Shu wants to use this to suppress the 9 families of Zhao Wu. With this, the merchants from the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce will gain a greater advantage. Ma Qing's eyes flashed as he clasped his hands and said to Zhang Sun Wuji. He naturally knew a little about the reason why the Yen Huang Bank had banned the merchants from Yin Kingdom and Kong Kingdom. However, he could not be too clear with Zhang Sun Wuji at this moment. Otherwise, after Zhang Sun Wuji knew the truth of the matter, his plan would fail. Secondly, if he told the reason why the Yen Huang Bank had banned the merchants from Yin Kingdom and Kong Kingdom in detail, wouldn't it mean that he was very clear about the inside story of this matter? At that time, with Zhang Sun Wuji's intelligence, it would be hard for him not to think that he was one of the parties involved in this matter. He could only be an outsider and tell Zhang Sun Wuji such news so that Zhang Sun Wuji wouldn't be suspicious. The Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce? You're saying that Li Ku is secretly helping the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce? Zhang Sun Wuji's eyes narrowed and his expression turned ugly as he asked in a deep voice. The Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce had been developing vigorously for more than a year and its power had gradually grown. Its fame wasn't inferior to the 9 families of Zhao Wu. People like Qin Xiong, Qing Yaojin, Niu Jinda, and the others all had shares in the Strange Taste Pavilion because of their relationship with Li Zixuan. The dividends they received every month weren't a small amount. Originally, because they were relatives of the royal family, the Zhangsun family was considered a wealthy family. However, because of Li Zixuan, the Qin and Qing families were almost richer than the Zhangsun family. It wasn't that Zhang Sun Wuji was greedy for money. It was just that every time he thought of this, he couldn't help but feel angry. Now that he knew that Li Ku could possibly use the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce to suppress other merchants and raise the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce, Zhang Sun Wuji was even more unhappy. Hearing that, Ma Qing hurriedly stood up in fear and trepidation and said, This is just my personal guess. I don't have any evidence. Elder, you don't have to take it seriously. Why would Li Ku suddenly go against the merchants from the Kong Kingdom and the Yin Kingdom for no reason? In the side hall, Zhang Sun Wuji put down the teacup in his hand and looked at Ma Qing, who was seated below him, as he asked in confusion. I don't know about that. However, the Yen Huang Bank had specifically targeted the merchants from the Kong Nation and the Yin Nation. They were probably only after profits. Elder, you should know that the 9 families of Zhao Wu have been doing business in the Central Plains for many years. They are strong and have many shops. Perhaps His Highness, the King of Shu, wants to use this to suppress the 9 families of Zhao Wu. In this way, the merchants of the Yen Huang Chamber of Commerce will gain an even greater advantage. Ma Qing's eyes flashed as he clasped his hands towards Zhang Sun Wuji and said. He naturally knew a little about the reason why the Yen Huang Bank had banned the merchants from the Yin Kingdom and the Kong Nation. However, at this moment, he couldn't be too clear with Zhang Sun Wuji. Otherwise, after Zhang Sun Wuji knew the truth of the matter, his plan would fail. Secondly, if he told the reason why the Yen Huang Bank had banned the merchants from the Yin Kingdom and the Kong Nation in detail, wouldn't it mean that he was very clear about the inside story of this matter? At that time, with Zhang Sun Wuji's intelligence, it would be hard for him not to think that he himself was also involved in this matter. Chapter 2163. Golden-robed guards. After Ma Qing left, Zhang Sun Wuji sat alone in the side hall. After a long time, his old face sank as he muttered to himself, "This Li Ku is proficient in both literature and martial arts. His intelligence is extraordinary, and he has some of His Majesty's style back then." Speaking till here, Zhang Sun Wuji suddenly laughed coldly, and his face gradually turned cold. Zhang Sun Wuji didn't really care about the Yen Wang Bank. After all, those merchants from the Kong nation and the An nation had nothing to do with Zhang Sun Wuji. Even if those merchants lost their families because of this, Zhang Sun Wuji wouldn't bat an eyelid. What he really cared about was Li Ku's ability to control the Yen Wang Bank from this incident. Zhang Sun Wuji wasn't a short-sighted person. He could see the potential of the Yen Wang Bank. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken out almost all of the Zhang Sun family's money to invest in the Yen Wang Bank. Although the Yen Wang Bank was just a small yamen under the Ministry of Revenue, this small yamen had only been established for less than a year, and it had already affected the citizens of Great Tang's 360 states. Furthermore, it had almost completely replaced the position of copper coins as a currency. In the future, this Yen Wang Bank would definitely become an existence that wouldn't be weaker than any of the 6 ministries in the imperial court. This yamen controlled the economic lifeline of Great Tang. But Li Ku, despite being a prince, was in control of such an important office. Not only that, he had even developed a guard force. The Golden Clothed Guard, an elite force that Li Junxian had personally assisted in creating. At that time, Li Ku wasn't just rich, he also had soldiers. Zhang Sun Wuji couldn't help but think, if he didn't handle it well, there might be another Xuanwu Gate incident a few years later. In Zhang Sun Wuji's heart, such a terrifying thought suddenly popped up without any reason. "Men, prepare the carriage. This old man wants to make a trip to the palace." After a long silence, Zhang Sun Wuji raised his head and shouted at the door. He couldn't allow Li Ku to continue developing like this. Otherwise, in the future, Li Ku would definitely become the biggest threat to Li Chengqian's position as the crown prince. He couldn't allow such a variable to appear. "Yes, old master." The old servant guarding outside the door was shocked and hurriedly replied. Not long after, a carriage drove out of the Zhangsun estate, heading in the direction of the imperial palace. At the corner of the alley, a man looked in the direction of the carriage with a meaningful smile on his face. A moment later, the man turned around and left. Gold-robed guards. After Ma Qing left, Zhang Sun Wuji sat alone in the side hall. After a long time, his old face sunk as he muttered to himself, "This Li Ku is proficient in both literature and martial arts. His wisdom is extraordinary. He does have some of His Majesty's style back then." Speaking up to this point, Zhang Sun Wuji suddenly sneered, and his expression gradually became somewhat gloomy. Zhang Sun Wuji didn't really care about the Yen Wang Bank. After all, those merchants from the Kong nation and the An nation had nothing to do with Zhang Sun Wuji. Even if those merchants lost their families because of this, Zhang Sun Wuji wouldn't bat an eyelid. What he was really concerned about was the power that Li Ku had over the Yen Wang Bank. Zhang Sun Wuji was not a short-sighted person. He could see the potential of the Yen Wang Bank. Otherwise, he would not have taken out almost all of the Zhang Sun family's money. Chapter 2164. Just as I expected, Duke Zhao is already suspicious of King Wei because of this matter. He must have already reached the palace and reported this matter to His Majesty. In a tea-house in Chang'an City, Ma Qing held the teacup in his hand as he spoke calmly. There was even a trace of pride on his face. Sitting opposite him was a slightly plump and boorish-looking old man from the Hua mansion. Judging from his appearance, who else could he be but the An Kingdom's merchant and Shunkai? Ma Zhansher is truly a genius. I admire you. Hearing this, An Xuansai's eyes lit up. He saw that Ma Qing didn't even bat an eyelid after hearing his flattery. He immediately understood and hurriedly took out a stack of $100 bills from his sleeve and handed it to Ma Qing. He said, "This is a small gift from Shunkai and the other merchants. I hope Ma Zhansher can accept it." Ma Qing's eyebrows twitched. His right hand that was holding the teacup couldn't help but tremble. Such a thick stack of bills, even if it wasn't 10,000 strings of cash, it was at least 7,000 to 8,000 strings of cash. More importantly, before he visited Zhangsun Wuji this morning, this Shunkai had already given him 3,000 strings of cash. He didn't expect him to give him so much more now. It's really easy to earn money from these barbarian merchants. Ma Qing thought to himself. After all, this matter involves King Shu and King Wei. We can only take it slowly. If we act too hastily, only death awaits all of you. Now that Duke Zhao has entered the palace to meet His Majesty, let's wait patiently for news from the palace. Although he was extremely excited, Ma Qing's face remained calm. He was the crown prince, an official of the Tang Empire. The person in front of him was just a barbarian merchant with some stinky money. As the existence at the top of the food chain, Ma Qing wasn't willing to lose his composure in front of Shunkai. Just as I expected, Duke Zhao is already suspicious of King Wei because of this matter. He must have already reached the palace and reported this matter to His Majesty. In a tea-house in Chang'an City, Ma Qing held the teacup in his hand as he spoke calmly. There was even a trace of pride on his face. Sitting opposite him was a slightly plump and boorish-looking old man from the Hua mansion. Judging from his appearance, who else could he be but the in-kingdom merchant Shunkai? Ma Zhan is really a genius. I'm impressed. Hearing this, Shun's eyes lit up. He saw that Ma Qing didn't even bat an eyelid after listening to his flattery. He immediately understood and hurriedly took out a stack of $100 bills from his sleeve and handed it to Ma Qing. He said, "This is a small gift from Shun and the other 9 merchants. I hope Ma Qing can accept it." Ma Qing's eyebrows twitched. His right hand, which was holding the teacup, couldn't help but tremble. Such a thick stack of Tang yuan, even if it wasn't 10,000 strings of cash, it was at least 7,000 to 8,000 strings of cash. More importantly, before he visited Zhangsun Wuji this morning, this Shun had just given him 3,000 strings of cash. He never expected that Shun would give him so much more now. It was really easy to earn money from these barbarian merchants. Ma Qing thought to himself. After all, this matter involves the King of Shu and King of Wei. We can only take it slowly. If we act too hastily, only death awaits you. Now that Duke Zhao has entered the palace to meet His Majesty, let's wait patiently for news from the palace. Chapter 2165. Greetings, Your Majesty. In the Suite du Hall, Zhangsun Wuji walked in and bowed to Li Er. There's no need to be so courteous. Li Er raised both his hands and smiled. In the previous dynasty, Li Er was already good friends with Zhangsun Wuji. After that, Zhangsun Wuji followed Li Er to conquer the world. After experiencing the change of dynasties and the change of Xuanwu Gate, the two of them had already established a deep friendship. In addition to their relationship with Empress Zhangsun, the two of them could be said to be even closer. Li Er was naturally quite satisfied with this brother-in-law of his. Not only was he knowledgeable and had outstanding ability, but he also knew how to judge the situation and observe the situation. He wasn't like Wei Jing, that old fellow, who always made him angry to death. The morning court just ended. Why did you return? Is there something important? Li Er put down his brush and sat up straight. He looked at Zhangsun Wuji and asked. On the way to the palace, Zhangsun Wuji had already prepared a draft. Now that he heard Li Er's question, he cupped his hands and said, Your Majesty, after I left the morning court, I heard that something strange happened in Chang'an City today. The Yanhuang Bank in the city suddenly announced that they would no longer cooperate with the merchants from An Kingdom and Kong Kingdom. As for the money that they had already lent out, the Yanhuang Bank ordered the merchants from An Kingdom and Kong Kingdom to pay it all back within 3 days. If not, they would hand it over to the authorities for investigation. I wonder if your Majesty has heard of this? So he was here for this matter. Li Er's eyes flashed, and he instantly understood. He looked at Zhang Sun Wuji expressionlessly and said, I heard about this from Zhao Song previously. Why? Could it be that this is the reason why the auxiliary aircraft is here? Greetings, Your Majesty. In the Suite du Hall, Zhang Sun Wuji walked in and bowed to Li Er. You don't have to be so courteous. Li Er raised both his hands and smiled. In the previous dynasty, Li Er was already good friends with Zhang Sun Wuji. After that, Zhang Sun Wuji followed Li Er to conquer the world. After experiencing the change of dynasties and the change of Xuanwu Gate, the two of them had already established a deep friendship. In addition to their relationship with Empress Zhangsun, the two of them could be said to be even closer. Li Er was naturally quite satisfied with this brother-in-law of his. Not only was he knowledgeable and had outstanding ability, but he also knew how to judge the situation and observe the situation. He wasn't like that old fellow Wei Jing, who could always anger him half to death. The morning court assembly has just ended. Why did the auxiliary aircraft return? Is there something important? Li Er put down his brush, sat up straight and asked Zhang Sun Wuji. On the way to the palace, Zhang Sun Wuji had already made up his mind. When he heard Li Er's question, he cupped his hands and said, Your Majesty, after I left the court, I heard that something strange happened in Chang'an City today. The Yanhuang Bank in the city suddenly announced that they would no longer cooperate with the merchants from An Kingdom and Kong Kingdom. As for the money that they had already lent, the Yanhuang Bank ordered the merchants from An Kingdom and Kong Kingdom to pay it all back within 3 days. Otherwise, they would be handed over to the authorities for investigation. I wonder if Your Majesty has heard of this? So that's why he's here. Li Er's eyes flickered, and he understood immediately. He looked at Zhang Sun Wuji expressionlessly and said, I have heard about this from Zhao Song. Why? Is this the reason why the auxiliary aircraft is here? Greetings, Your Majesty. In the Suite du Hall, Zhang Sun Wuji walked in and bowed to Li Er. The auxiliary aircraft isn't here. Chapter 2166. In the morning, a horse carriage drove out of the palace and headed towards Chongren Lane. The horse carriage was the second generation, Don't Touch Me, from Strange Interest Pavilion. Regardless of speed or comfort, it was much better than the ordinary horse carriages in the market. However, the person sitting in the horse carriage wasn't in the mood to enjoy. He frowned and his old face was so gloomy that water could drip from it. Could it be that I was wrong? Could it be that the king of Shu really didn't have the intention to fight for power? The person sitting in the carriage was Zhang Sun Wuji. Previously, he had a conversation with Li Er in the palace, and in the end, they naturally parted on bad terms. However, Li Er's last words were deeply engraved in his mind. Nobody knows a son better than a father. I know these few sons of mine better than you. Ku-er loves the way of the economy and has no intention of fighting for power. We are only 30 years old. We advise you not to get too involved in the battle for the throne. Recalling the words that Li Er had said in the Ganlu Hall, Zhang Sun Wuji couldn't help but have self-doubt. Impossible. I can't be wrong. The horse carriage moved forward at a moderate speed. The conversations of the pedestrians and the cries of the peddlers didn't seem to reach Zhang Sun Wuji's ears. He sat on the soft leather sofa in the horse carriage in a daze. After an unknown period of time, Zhang Sun Wuji shook his head violently. His eyes gradually regained their vigor and he muttered to himself. Holding an important position, having money and soldiers, plus the royal bloodline of 2 dynasties, how can he not have ambition? Even if he doesn't have it now, he will have it in the future, just like His Majesty back then. Other than Zhang Sun Wuji, there was no one else in the horse carriage. Obviously, his words were for himself to hear. He wanted to confirm the thoughts in his heart. He wanted to tell himself that he didn't do anything wrong. In the end, he still didn't believe that Li Er wouldn't have the intention to fight for power when he was in control of the Yanhuang Bank and the gold-robed guards. Putting himself in Li Ku's shoes, Zhang Sun Wuji asked himself honestly. If he was Li Ku and was in Li Ku's current situation, he definitely wouldn't have the slightest bit of ambition. Zhang Sun Wuji had gone through ups and downs in the officialdom for more than 10 years. Not only was he wise, but he also had a sharp eye. He had seen too many people, so he was confident that he wouldn't be wrong this time. "Master, we're here." Just like that, amidst Zhang Sun Wuji's self-doubt and self-resistance, the carriage stopped after a while. The coachman jumped off the carriage and bowed to Zhang Sun Wuji through the curtains. Yes. Zhang Sun Wuji finally regained his senses from his chaotic thoughts. He stood up, opened the curtains, and jumped down from the carriage. When the servant in front of the Zhang Sun residence saw the familiar carriage stop at the entrance, he quickly went up to welcome it. At this moment, Zhang Sun Wuji suddenly thought of something and said to the servant who was about to greet him, "Call Ma Cheng to the main hall to see this old man." His voice clearly contained a trace of anger. "Yes, master." When the subordinates heard this, they were instantly shocked. They could also sense that Zhang Sun Wuji was angry, so they quickly responded. Zhang Sun Wuji nodded and stepped into the mansion, heading towards the main hall. Obviously, he wanted to settle the score with Ma Cheng. If Ma Cheng hadn't come over this morning to bewitch him, he wouldn't have rashly gone to the palace to impeach Li Ku, and he wouldn't have been beaten by Li Er. Ma Cheng pays his respects to Cabinet Elder. After Zhang Sun Wuji returned to the main hall and drank half a cup of tea, there was a series of footsteps outside the house. Shortly after, Ma Cheng appeared in front of him and greeted him with a bow. Zhang Sun Wuji placed the teacup in front of his mouth and used the teacup cover to rub the teacup. He looked like he was seriously tasting the tea, but he was secretly observing Ma Cheng from the corner of his eyes. As expected, when he saw Ma Cheng bowing to him, he was also secretly observing him. Observing one's expression. Obviously, Ma Cheng wanted to observe some clues from Zhang Sun Wuji's expression to determine the results of Zhang Sun Wuji's trip to the palace. Zhang Sun Wuji retracted his gaze, but his heart was moved. He placed the teacup on the coffee table beside him and looked at Ma Cheng with a smile. "Zhongming, you don't have to be so courteous." Zhongming was Ma Cheng's courtesy name. Seeing the smile on Zhang Sun Wuji's face, Ma Cheng instantly felt relieved. When he greeted Zhang Sun Wuji previously, he saw that Zhang Sun Wuji was expressionless, neither happy nor angry. He thought that Zhang Sun Wuji's trip to the palace didn't go smoothly. Now, it seemed like Zhang Sun Wuji definitely had a fruitful trip. Therefore, Ma Cheng hurriedly stood up and couldn't wait to cup his hands and ask, "Cabinet Elder, did you just return from outside?" Although Ma Cheng was anxious to know the results, it didn't mean that he had lost his rationality. Of course, he couldn't directly ask Zhang Sun Wuji what Li Er said in the palace. If he did that, wouldn't the fact that he was secretly monitoring Zhang Sun Wuji be exposed? Therefore, at this moment, he had to feign ignorance and pretend that he didn't know that Zhang Sun Wuji went to the palace previously. Hearing that, Zhang Sun Wuji narrowed his eyes, but he quickly chuckled and said, "Ha ha! That's right, I just returned from the palace." Speaking up to this point, he deliberately paused. Indeed, he saw a flash of joy and eagerness in Ma Cheng's eyes. Therefore, he continued, "After I heard about the news of the Yanhuang Bank from you, I immediately went to the palace and informed His Majesty. After His Majesty heard the news, he was furious. After all, the Yanhuang Bank is an official yamen under the Ministry of Revenue. How can King of Shu suppress whoever he wants? In the long run, where will the prestige of the imperial court be? Where will His Majesty's prestige be? Speaking up to this point, Zhang Sun Wuji's expression became agitated and even faintly contained a trace of anger. In Ma Cheng's opinion, Zhang Sun Wuji was angered by Li Ku's reckless actions, but in reality, His Majesty is brilliant. After all, the Yan Huang Bank belongs to the imperial court and not King of Shu alone. Ma Cheng hurriedly licked his lips and echoed. Following which, he finally asked the question that he had always wanted to ask. Cabinet Elder, I wonder how His Majesty intends to deal with this matter? This was the question that he was most concerned about. Because if he could really help Shunkai and the rest get rid of the sanctions of the Yan Huang Bank, and Shunkai and the rest would definitely not lack benefits for him. After all, before this, Shunkai had already given him 10,000 strings of cash. Who knew how much benefits Shunkai would give him after this matter was settled? Another 10,000 strings of cash? Or 20,000 strings of cash? Thinking up to this point, Ma Cheng's breathing suddenly became hurried. Speaking of which, before this, he had never thought that he would one day have a wealth of 10,000 strings of cash. If it was in the past, he might have felt that 10,000 strings of cash was a lot and that he would never be able to spend so much money in his lifetime. But now, his greed had been aroused. In his opinion, since he had the chance to earn more 10,000 strings of cash, why not go for it? Of course, the higher the benefits, the greater the risk. Ma Cheng, who was blinded by greed, did not realize that danger was approaching him step by step. King of Shu used his authority to suppress the merchants of An country and Kong country for no reason. His Majesty has already urgently ordered King of Shu to return to the palace. I believe that it won't be long before the Yan Huang Bank welcomes a new manager. Zhang Sun Wuji snorted and said. At this moment, Ma Cheng's heart was about to jump out of his chest. If not for the fact that he knew that the current situation wasn't right, he would have jumped 3 feet high in excitement. He forced himself to calm down. A huge fortune was right in front of him and could even be obtained easily. He would have endless glory and wealth for the rest of his life and enjoy it endlessly. At this moment, he had to be steady and develop wretchedly. He definitely could not be reckless and let Zhang Sun Wuji see through the clues and become suspicious. Zhongming, you have done well in this matter. I called you over because I want you to continue to keep an eye on the Yan Huang Bank. Once there is news from there, immediately report to this old man. Zhang Sun Wuji continued at this moment. Ma Cheng thought that he had hidden it well, but in terms of foresight and expression management, how could he, a small fry who had just entered the officialdom, be a match for Zhang Sun Wuji who had been in the officialdom for more than 10 years? Although he forcefully suppressed the excitement in his heart, his tightly clenched fists had betrayed him. Zhang Sun Wuji could see through the clues at a glance. However, Zhang Sun Wuji did not expose him. Thank you for your praise, Cabinet Elder. Hearing Zhang Sun Wuji's praise, Ma Cheng's taut face could finally reveal a smile. He smiled and cupped his hands towards Zhang Sun Wuji, saying, Cabinet Elder, I am indebted to you for recognizing my worth. Zhongming is willing to go through fire and water for Cabinet Elder. I will go to the Yan Huang Bank to keep an eye on it for Cabinet Elder now. Go. Zhang Sun Wuji nodded with a gratified face and waved towards Ma Cheng. Ma Cheng cupped his hands towards Zhang Sun Wuji, then turned around and left. The moment he turned around, Ma Cheng's face could no longer be taut. From the original smile, it turned into an extremely exaggerated laughter. However, he held it in and did not make a sound. After all, he had not gone far. Stepping out of the main hall's door, Ma Cheng seemed to be able to see countless Tang Yuan waving towards him. At this moment, he really wished that he had a pair of wings and could instantly fly to Anshuansai's side. It was not because he loved Shunkai, but because he could immediately obtain a lot of money from Enshunkai. With this money, he could totally establish his own household. Why would he need to continue being a guest in the Zhangsun residence? Qinghe. In the main hall, seeing that Ma Qing had already walked far away, Zhangsun Wuji hurriedly shouted towards the door. Your subordinate is here. Very quickly, a warrior holding a saber walked in from outside the house. This person was the Zhangsun family's guard leader, Zhangsun Qinghe, an expert at the peak of the Qi transformation realm. Immediately bring a few astute men to follow Ma Qing. If he did not go to the Yan Huang Bank and went to meet someone, bring him and that person back for me. Remember, I want them alive. Zhangsun Wuji said coldly with a solemn face. It was obvious that Ma Qing was hiding something from him and wanted to use him to achieve a certain goal. Zhangsun Wuji had been in a high position for many years. How could he tolerate such a small fry using and manipulating him? The reason why he did not expose Ma Qing was because Zhangsun Wuji wanted to see who was behind this fellow. Yes, family head. Hearing that, Zhangsun Qinghe accepted the order loudly and turned to leave. After a short while, 4 to 5 warriors left the Zhangsun residence and followed behind Ma Qing from afar. At this moment, Ma Qing was not heading towards the Yan Huang Bank's headquarters in the west. Instead, he was heading east. That was the east market of Chang'an City. Family Head's prediction was indeed correct. This fellow, Ma Qing, definitely has some shady business going on. Looking at Ma Qing's back, Zhangsun Qinghe muttered to himself. Shopkeeper, quickly call your boss over. Tell him that I have something to tell him. Half an hour later, Ma Qing arrived at a tea house in the East Market. After entering, he went straight to the counter and spoke to the shopkeeper in a low voice. This tea house was the one where he and Enshun had a discussion over tea in the morning. It was called Enshun Tea House. So it's Ma. Mr. Ma, please come upstairs. This old man will send someone to invite our boss over. The shopkeeper was just about to say, Who the hell are you? Our boss is not someone you can meet whenever you want, but when he looked up and took a closer look, he instantly felt that the person in front of him was somewhat familiar. After a moment, his heart quivered. He thought to himself, Isn't this the person who drank tea with the boss on the second floor in the morning? Moreover, before the boss left, he had specially instructed him that if this person came again, not only must he receive him well, but he must also immediately send someone to report to him. Therefore, the shopkeeper's expression changed several times, and he hurriedly changed his words. Hurry up. My time is limited. Ma Qing nodded and urged the shopkeeper. It was not that he was worried that he would be discovered if he stayed here for too long, but he could not wait to get more benefits that Enshun had promised. Yes. Mr. Ma, please come upstairs first. Our boss should be at the Enshun restaurant in the East Market. He will be here soon. The shopkeeper really thought that Ma Qing still had urgent matters to attend to. He was afraid that this distinguished guest that his boss had mentioned would not be able to wait and would leave, so he hurriedly pacified him. Ma Qing nodded and turned to go to the second floor. The shopkeeper's manservant was very perceptive and ran in front of Ma Qing to lead the way. De Zhuang, you run fast. Quickly go to the restaurant and ask the boss to come over. Just say that Mr. Ma is here. After watching Ma Qing go upstairs, the shopkeeper hurriedly pulled over a manservant and instructed. Yes. Shopkeeper who? The manservant responded, put down the tea tray in his hand, and ran out as if he was flying. Boss, should we go in and capture Ma Qing now? Under the banyan tree in the west corner of Enshun restaurant, Zhangsun Qinghe and his group were secretly observing here. At this moment, a slightly smaller Zhangsun residence guard opened his mouth and asked. Obviously, they already knew the mission of this trip, so they also called Ma Qing Ma Zhanshi and directly called him by his name. Wait first. Zhangsun Qinghe frowned and looked at the manservant that ran out of the tea house. he said. This Ma Ching just entered the tea-house, and a manservant ran out. Obviously, the main character has not arrived yet. Let's wait a little longer. When he spoke up to hear, Zhang Sun Qinghe turned his head and instructed the 4 people behind him in order to ensure that nothing went wrong. The few of you go and see if there are any other exits from this tea-house. If there is a back door, leave 2 people there to guard it. The other 2 come back and guard the front door with me. Yes, boss. Chapter 2167. Humph. Good for you, Ma Zhongming. How dare you? How dare you scheme against me? Seems like I have been too merciful all these years. Zhang Sun Wuji said angrily as he looked at Ma Ching, who was kneeling on the ground with his hands tied up. Actually, Zhang Sun Wuji was already suspicious of Ma Ching on the way back from the palace. After all, Ma Ching, as Crown Prince Zhan Shi, didn't accompany the Crown Prince to study in the East Palace today. Instead, he specially came over to mention the Yen Huang Bank's sanctions against the merchants from the An Nation and Kong Nation. Moreover, he intentionally or unintentionally led the topic to Li Ku, making Zhang Sun Wuji fearful of Li Ku's current power and impeach Li Ku. Zhang Sun Wuji, who had been in the officialdom for more than a decade and had fought with countless people in the officialdom, calmed down and thought carefully. He guessed that Ma Ching didn't come to look for him this morning just to reveal a piece of news to him. There was most likely a conspiracy behind it. So after he returned to his residence, Zhang Sun Wuji wanted to test Ma Ching. He purposely pretended that the trip to the Imperial Palace earlier was very smooth, causing Ma Ching to lower his guard and gradually reveal himself. After that, he ordered his men to capture Ma Ching and the people behind Ma Ching. An old fox was, after all, an old fox. The reason why Ma Ching was able to scheme against Zhang Sun Wuji in the morning was because Zhang Sun Wuji didn't have much vigilance against him. Moreover, he grasped Zhang Sun Wuji's weakness very well. He knew that Zhang Sun Wuji was even more concerned about Li Qingqian's position as the crown prince than Li Qingqian himself. As long as someone threatened Li Qingqian's position as the crown prince, Zhang Sun Wuji would definitely eliminate that person at all costs. But in terms of intelligence and methods, Zhang Sun Wuji was miles ahead of Ma Ching. The moment Zhang Sun Wuji became suspicious of Ma Ching's failure was already destined. Ma Ching couldn't win against Zhang Sun Wuji no matter if it was overt or covert methods. However, Zhang Sun Wuji's actions were a little risky, because he had previously used Li Er's name to deceive Ma Ching. He had altered Li Er's words. If the imperial censors knew about this, they might impeach him for the crime of tampering with the imperial edict. But Zhang Sun Wuji definitely wouldn't let this happen. At that moment, there was another person kneeling on the right side of Ma Ching. It was An Shunkai. Previously, An Shun had received news that Ma Ching had come to his tea-house. An Shun knew that if Ma Ching had come to find him at this time, it must be that there had been new progress in the matter he had previously requested. Therefore, he hurriedly rushed to the tea-house as fast as he could. However, before he could say a few words to Ma Ching, several saber-wielding warriors rushed in from outside the room. And Shun was shocked and hurriedly called for the servants and guards in the tea-house. However, who would have thought that the martial arts of the people who rushed in were so high? None of the more than a dozen people under An Shun's command were a match for the leading warrior. In a short while, they were all beaten down. After that, he and Ma Ching were tied up and brought here. As for Ma Ching, he recognized the leading saber-wielding warrior. It was the leader of the Zhang Sun family's guards, Zhang Sun Qinghe. The moment he recognized Zhang Sun Qinghe, Ma Ching's old face instantly turned ashen. He knew that he had lost. He was completely finished. At this moment, facing Zhang Sun Wuji's fury, Ma Ching's eyes were dull and he turned a deaf ear to it. His entire person was like a pile of mud, as if he would fall to the ground at any time. He didn't beg for mercy because now that the matter had been exposed, he knew that no matter what he said, he would only be left with a dead end. After all, he had offended Zhang Sun Wuji. He just didn't expect the matter to be exposed so quickly. He also didn't expect that Zhang Sun Wuji would suspect him the moment he returned from the palace and send people to follow him. What exactly happened in Taiyuan? What exactly happened after Zhang Sun Wuji went to the palace previously? This was the biggest doubt in Ma Cheng's heart. And Shunkai had told Ma Cheng some of the reasons why the Yan Huang Bank banned the merchants from An country and Kong country. However, it wasn't the whole story. Ma Cheng only knew that there were merchants with 9 surnames causing trouble in Taiyuan City, which was why the Yan Huang Bank did this today. However, from Ma Cheng's point of view, this matter wasn't completely irreversible. If the merchants with 9 surnames in Taiyuan were causing trouble, then the imperial court could just arrest them directly. However, the Yan Huang Bank punished all the merchants from An country and Kong country who were doing business in Tang Dynasty because of this. Wasn't it a little overboard? Therefore, he was willing to take the risk to help An Shunkai resolve this matter. However, from the current outcome, he seemed to have thought of this matter too simply. Zhang Sun Wuji must have hit a wall when he went to the palace to impeach Li Ku. Otherwise, Zhang Sun Wuji wouldn't have schemed against him the moment he returned and made him lower his guard so that he could find An Shunkai to report the good news. And you? Seeing Ma Cheng's drooping head and lifeless eyes, it was obvious that he knew that he was going to die and had given up on treatment. Zhang Sun Wuji turned to look at An Shunkai, who was kneeling beside Ma Cheng. He asked coldly, "You are the one who asked Ma Cheng to plot against me? You are the barbarian merchant?" Feeling the terrifying aura from Zhang Sun Wuji, and Shunkai was so frightened that he couldn't speak clearly. Actually, the moment he entered the Zhang Sun residence, he knew that he was done for. After doing business in Chang, An city for so many years, how could he not have heard of Zhang Sun Wuji's name? Previously, he asked Ma Cheng for help because he wanted to make use of Ma Cheng to connect with Zhang Sun Wuji, an important official of the Tang Dynasty's imperial court. However, he didn't expect things to develop to such a stage. Family head, this person is An Shunkai, an influential merchant from An country. He is the one who bribed Ma Cheng and wanted to borrow your hand to remove the ban from the Yan Huang Bank. Seeing that An Shunkai couldn't even speak clearly, Zhang Sun Qinghe cupped his fists and said to Zhang Sun Wuji, "Good. Very good." Zhang Sun Wuji's face was as cold as ice. He stared at An Shunkai and said word by word, "A mere merchant dares to plot against me? Very good. Qinghe, drag him away and break his limbs first. Then bring him here for me to question him." "Yes, family head." Zhang Sun Qinghe cupped his fists and accepted the order. He strode forward and wanted to lift An Shunkai up from the ground. An Shunkai was shocked when he heard that. At this moment this fellow could speak clearly. He quickly begged for mercy and said, "Duke Zhao, please spare my life. Duke Zhao, please spare my life. I just want to ask Duke Zhao to help me resolve the ban that the Yan Huang Bank has placed on us. It's just that Duke Zhao's position is high and powerful, and I'm just a merchant. It's very difficult for me to meet Duke Zhao. That's why I thought of asking Ma Zhansher from your residence to introduce me. I have no ill intentions towards Duke Zhao." What a good recommendation. In the end, you actually want to use me as a weapon in your hands to deal with the Yan Huang Bank. What a wild ambition. Zhang Sun Wuji sneered. Then, he suddenly felt that the name An Shunkai was a little familiar. Soon, he recalled what Li Er said to him in the palace. Qin Ke was kidnapped by a Turkic spy in Taiyuan City. The An Kingdom's merchant and Shun's Han colluded with the Turkic spy. The Kong Kingdom's merchant, Kong Chu, and the others instigated civil unrest and obstructed the officials from rescuing Qin Ke. Thinking of this, Zhang Sun Wuji's expression changed. He looked at Shunkai and asked coldly, "Wait, you are called Shunkai?" And Shunkai was already lifted up by Zhang Sun Qinghe and was about to be dragged away to have his limbs broken. When he heard Zhang Sun Wuji's sudden question, this fellow seemed to have seen a trace of hope for survival. He quickly nodded and said, "Yes, yes, yes. I am called Shunkai. Do you know Shun's Han? Who is he to you?" Zhang Sun Wuji waved his hand at Zhang Sun Qinghe, indicating for him to put Shunkai down first. Then, he looked at Shunkai and asked. In this era, brothers would usually have similar names. For example, Qing Chumo and Qing Chuliang, Yuqi Baolin and Yuqi Baohuan, Fang Yai and Fang Yiji. Although such things couldn't be said to be absolute, with such similar names, these two people were very likely to be brothers or came from the same clan. Zhang Sun Wuji asked this because he wanted to try his luck. He didn't expect that he would really meet him. I know. Of course I know him." And Xuansai's eyes lit up. Could it be that his cousin was friends with Zhang Sun Wuji? If that was the case, he would be able to avert danger today. Therefore, he quickly said, replying to Duke of Zhao, "And Shun's Han is this An's younger cousin. Shun's Han manages more than 100 shops in the Great Tang. As long as Duke of Zhao spares this one's life, this one and my younger cousin are willing to offer up all our wealth." "Shut up." This fellow still wanted to use money to bribe Zhang Sun Wuji. Zhang Sun Wuji couldn't help but frown and interrupt him. Then, he shouted coldly, "And Shun's Han colluded with Turkic spies in Taiyuan and held the king of Wei hostage. His crime is punishable by death. Since you are his cousin, this matter definitely has something to do with you. Qinghe, immediately escort this person to the Supreme Court and let Shaoqing Dai interrogate him properly." Hearing this, Ma Cheng, who was kneeling on the ground, trembled. He was filled with regret. No wonder the Yen Wang Bank wanted to ban the merchants from An country and Kong country. No wonder the cabinet elder returned empty-handed after making a trip to the palace. And Xuansai's cousin actually colluded with Turkic spies in Taiyuan. If he had known earlier, if Ma Cheng had known that such a thing happened in Taiyuan City, even if Shunkai gave him 100,000 strings of cash, he wouldn't have dared to interfere in this matter. Now, he could only feel endless regret in his heart. What? When Shunkai heard Zhang Sun Wuji's words, his face instantly turned pale. What did he just hear? His younger brother actually colluded with Turkic spies in Taiyuan City and held the king of Wei hostage? The thing that he was most worried about had indeed happened. Now, even if Zhang Sun Wuji didn't kill him, the Emperor of Great Tang wouldn't let him off. It was laughable that he was still pondering on how to remove the ban from the Yen Huang Bank. If he had known earlier, he would have fled Chang'an in advance. Yes. Family head. Zhang Sun Qinghe cupped his fists and received the order. Then, he strode forward and grabbed Xuansai's shoulder. Like dragging a dead dog, he dragged Shunkai out. Instantly, only Zhang Sun Wuji and Ma Cheng were left in the house. "Ma Zhongming, although you came from a humble background, I admire your talent. That's why I kept you in the residence back then and let you walk step by step to where you are today. But you have really disappointed me." Looking at the person that he had groomed, Zhang Sun Wuji shook his head. His face was filled with pain and disappointment. Indeed, when he first knew that Ma Cheng had schemed against him, he really hated Ma Cheng to the core. He couldn't wait to tear Ma Cheng into pieces to vent the hatred in his heart. But now that he had calmed down, there was only pain and disappointment left in Zhang Sun Wuji's heart. Ma Cheng was indeed a talented person. Moreover, he was groomed by him. Ma Cheng was able to turn from a poor scholar back then to the Crown Prince Zhan Shi today. Behind this, Ma Cheng's own hard work was behind it. But more importantly, it was Zhang Sun Wuji's help in the dark. recommending the person that he had groomed to the East Palace as the Crown Prince Zhang Shi was a move that Zhangsun Wuji had spent a lot of effort on. He wanted to correct the Crown Prince's wrong thinking of belittling Confucianism and emphasizing engineering. Besides, with Ma Qing in the East Palace, if anything happened over there, he would be able to know about it immediately. But now, the move that he had put in so much effort into had come to nothing because of the betrayal of his own people. How could he not be heartbroken? How could he not be disappointed? Cabinet Elder, Zhong Ming is indebted to you for recognizing my worth. Zhong Ming is deeply grateful. Today, I was blinded by greed and did such a foolish thing. Zhong Ming knows that I have no face to meet Cabinet Elder in the future. I am willing to atone for my sins with death. Ma Cheng's expression was a little moved. He banged his head on the ground and kowtowed heavily to Zhangsun Wuji. Then, he groaned and a large amount of blood flowed out from his mouth. Following that, his neck tilted and his eyes rolled as he fell to the ground. This guy actually bit his tongue to commit suicide. From the perspective of modern medicine, there was no scientific basis for the description of death by biting one's tongue in the novel. Actually, in real life we could often see many people who had their tongues injured or even lost part of their tongues due to various reasons but still survived. But generally speaking, biting one's tongue to commit suicide would usually result in the tongue being severed at the root. The person would usually faint because they couldn't bear the pain. Because the blood vessels at the root of the tongue were larger, and because the tongue was in the mouth, it wasn't easy to use methods such as compressing the blood vessels to stop the bleeding. If the bleeding couldn't be stopped, then the person who bit his tongue to commit suicide would definitely die from excessive blood loss. As for cutting the tongue, because it was cut from the outside, the tongue wouldn't be severed at the root. Only the tip of the tongue would be cut off, so the pain was relatively smaller. When a person bit their tongue, they would bite off the root of the tongue, the root of the part in the mouth. The remaining part would block the trachea, causing the person to suffocate to death. The tongue was rich in blood vessels. After biting the tongue, one would bleed to death. The intense pain after biting the tongue would cause the person to temporarily lose their rationality. The large amount of blood and secretions from the mouth could be inhaled into the trachea, causing choking and coughing. Choking and coughing would further worsen the lack of oxygen. The possibility of death due to mechanical asphyxiation and traumatic coma couldn't be ruled out. The blood vessels on the tongue were rich. Once they were severed, there would be massive bleeding, causing the body to lack blood. Also, the tongue was very close to the brain, so the nerves on it were rich and controlled directly by the brain. Once it was strongly stimulated, it would directly stimulate the central nervous system, causing the central nervous system to be damaged and cause death. Zhangsun Wuji's gaze turned cold. He knew that Ma Qing had most likely bit his tongue to commit suicide. He didn't expect that this guy would suddenly wake up at the last moment and have the courage to bite his tongue to commit suicide and atone for his sins with his death. Looking at Ma Cheng's body on the ground, Zhangsun Wuji sighed and shouted outside, "Men!" Chapter 2168. The reason why Ma Cheng committed suicide by biting his tongue was because he knew that Zhangsun Wuji would definitely not spare him. However, he was still a third-grade crown prince. No matter how much Zhangsun Wuji hated him, it wasn't possible for him to kill him directly. That would only give Zhangsun Wuji an advantage. The shrewd Zhangsun Wuji would definitely not do such a thing. In other words, Ma Cheng could have kept his life. However, Zhangsun Wuji was the current Minister of Rights after all. Moreover, he was the elder brother of Empress Zhangsun. He had great influence in the imperial court. Since he had offended Zhangsun Wuji, even if he could keep his life, it would be difficult for him to do anything in the imperial court in the future. Since Zhangsun Wuji was able to push him to his current position, he could easily pull him down as well. At that time, he would once again become that powerless scholar. At that time, if Zhang Sun Wuji wanted to crush him, wouldn't it be as easy as crushing an ant? By then, Zhang Sun Wuji wouldn't even need to do anything personally. Those who wanted to curry favor with Zhang Sun Wuji would take the initiative to help Zhang Sun Wuji get rid of this trouble. More importantly, after Zhang Sun Wuji killed him, he might even vent his anger on his family. This was what Ma Qing didn't want to see the most. Therefore, instead of dying in such a sullen manner and implicating his family, Ma Qing felt that it was better to commit suicide. This way, it would save Zhang Sun Wuji a lot of trouble. In this way, Zhang Sun Wuji probably wouldn't vent his anger on his family. Yes, family head. Most of the Zhang Sun residence's guards were soldiers who had retired from the battlefield. They were all experienced. Seeing this scene, a few of them were first shocked, but they quickly calmed down. They cupped their fists towards Zhang Sun Wuji, then carried Ma Qing, whose face was covered in blood, away and left. Not long later, maids and servants came in to clean up the bloodstains on the ground. Zhang Sun Wuji wasn't willing to continue staying here, and was preparing to leave. However, at this moment, a voice came from outside. "Father, you're back?" It was Zhang Sun Chang's voice. Yanwang College was currently on summer vacation. Only the members of the Trump Card Project team would continue their research activities in the college. The rest of the students had basically gone home. Although Zhang Sun Chang's proficiency in the 4 books and 5 classics was not bad, he was still a layman in the college. Whether it was mathematics, physics, or chemistry, his grades were not considered top-notch in the college. He had always been in the middle and lower levels. Therefore, he was not able to enter the Trump Card Project. During the summer vacation in the college, he naturally stayed at home. Hearing Zhang Sun Chang's voice from outside, Zhang Sun Wuji, who was about to stand up and leave, sat back down. After a while, Zhang Sun Chong rushed in. The moment this fellow entered, he saw a few servants scrubbing the ground in the middle of the main hall. He was startled at first, but his gaze inadvertently caught a glimpse of a pool of blood on the ground. Zhang Sun Chang's expression instantly changed. He looked nervously at Zhang Sun Wuji and asked, "Father, what's wrong?" Zhang Sun Wuji raised his eyelids and lightly reprimanded, "What are you panicking for? It's just a person who died." Zhang Sun Chong was born in a time of peace. At least, most of his memories were from the Tang Dynasty. He was not like Zhang Sun Wuji, who had experienced the chaotic times at the end of the Sui Dynasty. Therefore, when he saw the bloodstains in the main hall of his house, Zhang Sun Chong subconsciously panicked. Now that he heard Zhang Sun Wuji say, "Someone died," Zhang Sun Chong instantly panicked. He widened his eyes, looked at Zhang Sun Wuji and asked, "Someone died? Who died?" "All of you are dismissed." Seeing that the bloodstains on the ground were almost wiped clean, Zhang Sun Wuji waved his hands at the few servants and said, "Yes, old master." The few of them bowed and accepted the order. They took the cleaning tools and left the main hall, closing the door on their way out. A person who deserved to die, Ma Qing. When only the father and son were left in the room, Zhang Sun Wuji opened his mouth. "Ma Qing? The Ma Qing who just became the crown prince, Zhan Shi? Father, why did you?" As the eldest young master of the Zhang Sun residence, Zhang Sun Chong knew some things. When he heard Zhang Sun Wuji say that Ma Qing was dead, Zhang Sun Chong's heart instantly thumped. He thought to himself, why did his father want to kill Zhang Sun Chong? Could it be that his father wanted to rebel, and was discovered by Ma Qing? Thinking of this, Zhang Sun Chong's small face instantly turned pale. He, the son of a duke, hadn't had enough of a good life. How could his father rebel? Now that the emperor had so many valiant generals under him, he had a strong army. How could he not think things through? Unfilial son. Ma Qing bit his tongue to commit suicide. What nonsense are you thinking about? Seeing Zhang Sun Chong's pale face and looking at him strangely, Zhang Sun Wuji's face instantly darkened as he scolded angrily. It was obvious that Zhang Sun Chong was thinking about some messy things in his heart. Ma Qing bit his tongue to commit suicide? Hearing this, Zhang Sun Chong's face was filled with surprise. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Following which, he asked curiously, "Then, father, why did Ma Qing bite his tongue to commit suicide?" Zhang Sun Wuji's face was gloomy as he said, "This fellow colluded with the merchants of the Yin Kingdom and plotted against me. He wanted me to enter the palace to impeach the king of Shu. After the matter was exposed, he bit his tongue to commit suicide." Seeing that Zhang Sun Chong was still filled with doubt, Zhang Sun Wuji roughly explained what happened this morning to Zhang Sun Chong. After hearing half of it, Zhang Sun Chong exclaimed, "What? There are Turkic spies in Taiyuan City? And they even kidnapped Qin Ke? What about the rest of the teachers and students in the academy? How are they now?" After staying in Yanhuang College for a year, Zhang Sun Chong more or less had some feelings for the college. Compared to his home and Chang'an City, he actually preferred to stay in the college. The college gave him a very special feeling. If he really had to describe it, it would be the feeling of freedom. There wasn't a strict hierarchy here, nor was there complicated scheming and fighting for power. Everyone was equal. For knowledge and truth, students could even quarrel with teachers. Under the pure learning atmosphere, the hearts of the teachers and students became purer. He really liked this kind of simple and free atmosphere. Thus, when he heard from Zhang Sun Wuji that Li Tai was kidnapped by a Turkic spy, Zhang Sun Chong subconsciously became nervous. Taiyuan City was sealed off 2 days ago. His Majesty sent the cavalry commander Li Junxian to Taiyuan City to personally take charge of the rescue operation. His Majesty didn't receive any news about the other Yanhuang College teachers and students, so they should be fine. Zhang Sun Wuji looked at his son with a complicated gaze and replied expressionlessly. Fortunately. Zhang Sun Chong heaved a sigh of relief and muttered to himself. Immediately after, he realized that something was wrong and said, "That's not right. 2 days ago, I just went to the college. With such a huge matter happening, how could Teacher Ji and Teacher Kong Gui not know about it? Father, you aren't lying to me, right?" Zhang Sun Wuji's face turned black again. He forcefully resisted the urge to beat this unfilial son in front of him to death, and said in a muffled voice, "This is what His Majesty said in the palace just now. Do you think His Majesty has the time to lie to you? That shouldn't be the case." Zhang Sun Chong scratched his head and said awkwardly. He knew that he was just a small figure in Li Er's eyes. Naturally, Li Er wouldn't lie to him. Zhang Sun Wuji looked at his prodigal son indifferently and said, "Taiyuan City is sealed off. Outsiders can't enter, and it's hard for news to spread out. His Majesty should be able to receive the news thanks to the telegraph machine that your college invented. However, since His Majesty didn't inform the officials of this news, it means that His Majesty doesn't want the news to spread. This matter should be classified as a secret. Don't spread it outside." Although Li Er didn't tell Zhang Sun Wuji to keep it a secret, with Zhang Sun Wuji's intelligence, it wasn't difficult for him to deduce this. He was just afraid that his bastard son wouldn't know the severity of this matter and would spread the news everywhere. "Oh, I got it, father." Zhang Sun Chong nodded and replied. As for whether he really knew or was faking it, only God would know. Looking at Zhang Sun Chong, who was obviously absent-minded, Zhang Sun Wuji sighed helplessly in his heart. Back then, he sent Zhang Sun Chong to Yanhuang College mainly because he thought highly of Li Zixuan's potential. He wanted Zhang Sun Chong to get close to Li Zixuan and express the goodwill of the Zhang Sun family to rope in Li Zixuan. However, a year had passed, and the status of Yanhuang College in Tang Dynasty was getting higher and higher. Li Zixuan's official position was also getting higher and higher. Now, he was even conferred a prefecture and became the provincial governor of a prefecture. Moreover, Li Zishuan's attitude towards the Zhangsun family had always been ambiguous. He was far from being as close as he was to the Qing, Qin, Yuqi, and Niu families. Zhang Sun Chong obviously didn't complete the task that he gave him. Not only that, this bastard son of his seemed to have sacrificed himself. Otherwise, why would Zhang Sun Chong be so worried about the Yanhuang College teachers and students in Taiyuan? This brat really thought that he was a part of Yanhuang College. Chong, how is your relationship with the king of Shu in the academy? Suddenly, Zhang Sun Wuji's heart skipped a beat as he looked at Zhang Sun Chong and asked, "Little Ku, our relationship is still alright." "Why, father?" Zhang Sun Chong didn't know why his father would ask such a question. He thought for a moment before answering. The corner of Zhang Sun Wuji's mouth twitched as he said angrily, "What does still alright mean? Are you very close or are you just passers-by?" Zhang Sun Chong scratched his head awkwardly and said, "This, father, still alright means that it's normal. Little Ku's position in the academy is very special. He rarely attends classes in the teaching hall and spends most of his time in the Yanhuang Bank. Also, Yamacho would often teach him some things in private. The way of economics, which is the way to manage the Yanhuang Bank. Therefore, other than Yamacho, Little Ku is the most knowledgeable person in economics in the academy. I usually attend classes in the teaching hall and don't have many chances to see him. Our relationship is just average. It can't be said to be especially good, but it can't be said to be bad either." Hearing this, Zhang Sun Wuji pointed at Zhang Sun Chong in disappointment as he felt extremely depressed. Zhang Sun Wuji had been wise all his life and was very intelligent. When he was young, he became friends with Li Er and became in-laws with him. After Li Yuan started the war in Jinyang, he went to serve him and followed Li Er to conquer the world. Step by step, he became a trusted strategist. Later on, he participated in the planning of the Xuanwu Gates Rebellion, which led to his current prominent position in the imperial court. But how did he give birth to such a disappointing son? He led the officials in the imperial court while his son could only be an inconspicuous passerby in the academy. Why was Li Ku able to become Li Zishuan's direct disciple and take charge of the Yanhuang Bank, while his son could only obediently stay in the teaching hall and listen to the teachers of the academy? When the academy reopens next month, you don't have to go to school anymore. After a moment of silence, Zhang Sun Wuji said with a tired heart. He felt that he couldn't afford to lose face like this. "Ah, father, why is that?" Zhang Sun Chong was dumbfounded and immediately said anxiously, "Just because I'm not familiar with Little Ku, you don't want me to continue studying in the academy? What kind of logic is this? No. I still want to go to the academy." "Unfilial son. What are you going to do in the academy? Are you going to lose face for me? As my son, your results in the academy can only be ranked in the middle. You can't even be compared to some of the commoners, not to mention King Wei and King Shu. I've been wise all my life and can't afford to lose face like this." Hearing Zhang Sun Chong's words, Zhang Sun Wuji couldn't hold it in any more and roared. Hearing this, Zhang Sun Chong instantly complained, "Father, you can't blame me for this. Qin Ke and Little Ku were the first batch of students to learn engineering from the Yamacho. Their foundation is better than mine. Isn't it normal that I can't win against them? Father, don't worry. I'm already familiar with the subjects in the academy. Next semester, my results will definitely be in the top 200, no, top 100. This fellow was afraid that Zhang Sun Wuji wouldn't let him return to the academy to continue studying, so he directly set a goal of being in the top 100. As for whether he could achieve it, to be honest, Zhang Sun Chong wasn't sure himself. Who cares? I have to stabilize my father first, Zhang Sun Chong thought in his heart. Zhang Sun Wuji frowned and didn't say anything. Seeing this, Zhang Sun Chong had no choice but to continue. father, the children of the various families in the imperial court are basically studying in Yanhuang College. Some of them who aren't here are also planning to enter the academy next year. I've finally entered the academy, but you actually want to kick me out. This is really embarrassing for you. Chapter 2169. When they were in the palace this morning, Li Er had said to Zhang Sun Wuji, "No one knows a son better than a father. I know my son's better than you. Ku-er loves economics and has no intention of fighting for power." Zhang Sun Wuji didn't believe it at all. After all, Li Ku was in an important position now. He had money and soldiers. In addition, he had the royal bloodline of 2 dynasties. How could he not have any ambition? Even if he didn't have it now, he would definitely have it in the future, just like the general of heavenly strategies, Li Shimin. However, after Zhang Sun Wuji thought about it carefully, he felt that something wasn't right. Although Li Er had won the coup at the Xuanwu Gate, this coup had caused him to bear the infamy of killing his brother and imprisoning his father. It could be said that it was an eternal pain in his heart. As a father, Li Er shouldn't want his sons to follow in his footsteps. Therefore, since Li Er dared to let Li Ku take charge of the bank and establish the gold-robed guards, it meant that Li Er was sure that Li Ku wouldn't fight for the position of Li Qingqian's heir. If not, no matter how outstanding Li Ku's ability was, Li Er wouldn't have given him such an important position. However, why was Li Er so sure that Li Ku didn't have any intention of fighting for the position of heir? One must know that in this world, a person's heart was the most difficult to guess. Zhang Sun Wuji, who couldn't figure it out, saw his son. He secretly thought that Zhang Sun Chong and Li Ku were schoolmates, so he should be able to get some information from Zhang Sun Chong. However, he didn't expect that this kid had wasted so much time talking and didn't say anything. This really angered him half to death. It was fine that he didn't get any news from Li Ku, but Zhang Sun Wuji also wanted to hear Zhang Sun Chong's opinion of Li Zixuan. Back then, he had thrown out an olive branch to Li Zixuan, such as investing in the Yanhuang Bank, or giving the Zhang Sun family's iron mine to Li Zixuan for joint mining. Li Zixuan didn't reject his goodwill, but what made Zhang Sun Wuji depressed was that after Li Zixuan accepted his goodwill, he didn't give any feedback at all. It was as if he was taking benefits but not doing anything. Speaking of which, when Zhang Sun Wuji befriended Li Zixuan, he didn't want Li Zixuan to do anything for him. He just wanted to form a good relationship with him. However, Li Zixuan's attitude towards the Zhang Sun family was always ambiguous. This made Zhang Sun Wuji a little confused about Li Zixuan's attitude. It could only be said that the current Zhang Sun Wuji was still too weak. If he waited until the later period of Zhenguan or even Li Ye's reign, when he was in power, he might not even care about a young talent like Li Zixuan. If he couldn't get him, he would just destroy him. "Father, what do you mean by asking this? Don't tell me you want to deal with Yamacho?" In the main hall, Zhang Sun Chong suddenly recovered from his thoughts and looked at Zhang Sun Wuji as he quickly asked. Zhang Sun Wuji frowned and was about to flare up, but Zhang Sun Chong didn't wait for him to speak and continued, "Father, I advise you to give up on this idea as soon as possible. Yamacho is an unfathomable person. Not only is his martial arts extremely high, but the more I understand him, the more I feel that the knowledge in his head doesn't seem to belong to this world. It seems like there's nothing he can't do." The corner of Zhang Sun Wuji's mouth twitched, and he couldn't help but scold angrily, "I have no enmity with Yamacho. When did I say I want to deal with him?" However, he couldn't help but be slightly surprised. He didn't expect Zhang Sun Chong to have such a high evaluation of Li Zixuan. This brat had only stayed in the academy for a year, and he already had such an attitude towards Li Zixuan. In the future, wouldn't his brat treat Li Zixuan like a god? Father, you don't intend to deal with Yamacho? That's good. That's good. When Zhang Sun Chong heard this, he understood that he had misunderstood and couldn't help but awkwardly scratch his head. Zhang Sun Wuji didn't have the energy to complain about his son. He took a deep breath and said to Zhang Sun Chong, "I want to ask you, what is Li Zixuan's attitude towards the Crown Prince, King Wei and King of Shu? Who exactly does he support?" There was no need to doubt Zhang Sun Wuji's position. He would definitely support Li Zixuan unconditionally to be the Crown Prince. However, Zhang Sun Wuji had always been confused about the attitudes of these three princes. Zhang Sun Wuji couldn't tell which faction Li Zixuan belonged to. This, Zhang Sun Chong obviously understood the meaning behind Zhang Sun Wuji's question. He also knew the political stance of the Zhang Sun family. If he didn't answer this question well, Zhang Sun Wuji might treat Li Zixuan as a political enemy in the future. This was a situation that Zhang Sun Chong didn't want to see. Father, Yamacho seems to have a very good relationship with the Crown Prince, King Wei and King of Shu. During the military training at Yanhuang College, the Crown Prince, as the Crown Prince, personally participated in the military training at the college. During that time, I saw the Crown Prince and Yamacho often chatting and laughing. They were even close to calling each other brothers. As for King Wei and King of Shu, their relationship with Yamacho is needless to say. They admire Yamacho's knowledge from the bottom of their hearts and treat Yamacho with disrespect. Yamacho also taught them wholeheartedly. King Wei is a true disciple of Yamacho in the study of things. His attainments in engineering are even better than many teachers in the college. Therefore, King Wei is personally leading the team to the north. Little Ku is a true disciple of Yamacho in the study of economics. When Yamacho isn't in the bank, Little Ku is the one in charge. Therefore, Father, when you asked me which prince Yamacho supports, it's hard to say. Zhang Sun Chong thought for a while before speaking. Hearing this, Zhang Sun Wuji's expression was a little complicated. Actually, he had heard of the news that Zhang Sun Chong said before, but it was all scattered. Now that Zhang Sun Chong put all the information together, Zhang Sun Wuji suddenly realized that Li Zixuan seemed to be a non-partisan. He didn't explicitly support Li Tai, nor did he choose between Li Tai and Li Ku. This emperor is only 30 years old. This emperor advises you not to get too involved in the battle for the throne. Suddenly, Zhang Sun Wuji recalled what Li Zixuan said in the morning. Combining it with Zhang Sun Chang's previous analysis, Zhang Sun Wuji suddenly felt that Li Zixuan was the truly brilliant one. Now Li Er was only 30 years old. If there were no accidents, he could still sit on the throne for another 20 to 30 years. As a subject, it was too early to take sides now. It would easily arouse the suspicion of the emperor. Someone like Li Zixuan, who didn't side with any of the princes and didn't offend any of them, was a truly brilliant move. At this moment, Zhang Sun Wuji suddenly felt enlightened. He had thought it through. In the past, he was too stubborn to the point of being paranoid. He was too worried that Li Chengqian's position as the crown prince would be snatched away. He was even more worried than Li Chengqian himself. This would easily make Li Er unhappy and suspicious. Moreover, I feel that, Father, you don't have to worry about anyone competing with the crown prince for the throne. In the past, King Wei did have the intention to compete with the crown prince for favor. However, after entering Yanhuang College, King Wei devoted all his attention to engineering research. Now, he can't even be bothered to return to the palace. Father, do you think he will still compete with the crown prince for the throne? King Shu's situation is similar to King Wei's. Before going to the academy, King Shu didn't have any open or covert competition with the crown prince. After entering the academy, King Shu was engrossed in economics and didn't have the intention to compete with the crown prince for the throne. Therefore, Father, you don't have to worry about the crown prince's position at all. At this moment, Zhang Sun Chong spoke again. Zhang Sun Wuji frowned. Although he subconsciously felt that Zhang Sun Chong's words were a little too far-fetched, after thinking about it seriously, He felt that Zhang Sun Chang's words made some sense. After a long silence, Zhang Sun Wuji sighed and muttered to himself, "If this is the case, then this Yanhuang College is really a magical place." Actually, Li Zixuan's political stance was very clear. He wasn't a non-partisan person like Zhang Sun Wuji thought. There was no doubt that Li Zixuan supported Li Chengqian to be the crown prince. This was because with the current situation in Great Tang, only Li Chengqian as the crown prince would not cause internal turmoil in the imperial court. In history, Li Chengqian's personality was explosive, wild, and arrogant. He even kept male pets, so he was indeed unfit to be the crown prince. However, that was only after Li Chengqian came of age. The current Li Chengqian treated others generously, diligently, and loved the people. He hadn't gone down the wrong path yet. Li Zixuan felt that he was a very good candidate for the crown prince. Moreover, Li Zixuan felt that with his intervention and guidance as a transmigrator, Li Chengqian would definitely not repeat the mistakes of history. Moreover, he would be able to become a wise emperor. Therefore, Li Zixuan supported Li Chengqian to be the crown prince. However, the way he supported Li Chengqian wasn't as extreme as Zhang Sun Wuji's. Zhang Sun Wuji's desire for control was too strong. He wanted everything to be within his control. He wanted Li Chengqian to work hard according to the image of the crown prince in his heart. Moreover, if there was someone who could threaten Li Chengqian's position as the crown prince, Zhang Sun Wuji would do all he could to get rid of that threat. On the other hand, Li Zixuan was different. On one hand, he guided Li Chengqian on the right path. On the other hand, in history, Li Tai and Li Ku, the two princes who were a threat to Li Chengqian's position as the crown prince, Li Zixuan kept them by his side. Through discovering their interests and strengths, he guided them to focus on their respective fields of expertise. Actually, did Li Tai and Li Ku really care about the crown prince's position in the past? Not necessarily. How would a half-grown child know so many things? What they cared about was probably Li Er's favor. Sons fighting for favor in front of their father was a very normal thing. That was why Li Tai and Li Chengqian fought openly and secretly in the palace in the past. However, when the two of them discovered the door to another world, they would realize how childish and boring they were in the past. Thus, they would put more energy into the fields that they were truly interested in. Li Chengqian, Li Tai, and Li Ku were currently moving in the direction that Li Zixuan had predicted. Moreover, their achievements were quite good. Of course, the main reason for this was that Li Tai and Li Ku were really talented in engineering and economics. Otherwise, Li Zixuan wouldn't be able to make bricks without straw. Therefore, compared to Zhang Sun Wuji, Li Zixuan's method of supporting Li Chengqian wasn't simply to suppress or support him. In fact, he was helping Li Chengqian, Li Tai, and Li Ku, who said that when two tigers fight, one of them must be injured. Couldn't it be a win-win situation or a win-win situation? Wasn't it good to be in such a harmonious situation? Li Er's three sons were actually quite talented. If the three brothers could unite and fight against the outside world together, it would definitely be a great blessing for the millions of people in Tang Empire. As for the other countries, it wouldn't be a blessing. It would be a nightmare. The news of Anshuansai's capture quickly spread to many people. Kong Fuliang and the others, who had gone to the new workshop with Anshunkai, were now all gathered in the main hall of the Inn Mansion. Not only them, but all the reputable merchants in Chang'an, especially the merchants from the Kong Kingdom and the Inn Kingdom, were also gathered here. It was Anshunkai who had gathered them here. Previously, Anshunkai had given Ma Qing more than 10,000 strings of coins, which was crowd-funded by these people. After all, the ban of the Yanhuang Bank had a huge impact on the merchants from the Inn and Kong kingdoms who did business in Tang Empire. As long as the ban could be lifted, they were still willing to fork out money. Oh no! Oh no! My master has been captured in the Anshun tea house. At this moment, a waiter ran in and said while panting. It was the waiter from the Inshun tea house. The Inshun tea house was in the east of Chang'an City, while the Inn residence was in the south of Chang'an City. The distance between the two places was still a little far, so the waiter had only just arrived to report the news. What? Everyone in the room was shocked. Kong Fuliang stood up and said, "What did you say? Bossan has been captured? Did you see who the other party was?" According to the shopkeeper, the other party is most likely from the Zhangsun family. The waiter panted and raised his head to reply. What? The Zhangsun family? Kong Fuliang's expression changed. He said with some despair, "It's over." Could it be that Duke Zhao saw through Bossan's plan, so he sent people to capture Bossan? When the others heard this, their expressions also changed. Everyone present knew about Inshuansai's plan to bribe Ma Qing and mediate the ban of the Yanhuang Bank. Otherwise, they wouldn't have willingly forked out money. I still have matters to attend to at home, so I'll take my leave first. At this moment, a Hu merchant sitting below suddenly stood up and cupped his fists to Kong Fuliang and the others. Since Zhangsun Wuji had captured Inshunkai, it meant that the Zhangsun family was likely to attack the Yin family next. They couldn't care less about the ban of the Yanhuang Bank. At this moment, it was more important for them to protect themselves. They couldn't have anything to do with Inshunkai. I just remembered that my wife is about to give birth today, so I'll take my leave first. When there was a first, there would be a second. Almost as soon as the first Hu merchant finished speaking, another Hu merchant stood up and cupped his fists. My house caught fire, so I'll take my leave first. After a while, most of the Hu merchants in the main hall left, leaving only Kong Fuliang and the others who were closer to Inshunkai. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.